Tonight, while you sleep, a comet that appears only once every 1,350 years is speaking directly to your prosperity, and you may not realize this, but at this very moment as I speak these words, the Lemmon Comet is traveling through our sky, carrying a message written in starlight about your financial future and your abundance. And this is not metaphor. This is not poetry. This is the literal truth that Florence Scovel Shinn taught about the correspondence between heaven and earth. And as you listen to these words, the comet is already beginning to reorganize the field around your money, your opportunities, and your receiving, and you do not need to see it with your eyes because your subconscious is already responding to its presence. And if you have been struggling with lack or limitation, or if you have been waiting for your breakthrough, or if you have been wondering when your prosperity will finally arrive, then you were guided to this teaching at this exact moment, because the comet does not speak to everyone, but only to those whose souls are ready to receive what the universe has been preparing for them. You can close your eyes now, and everything that needs to happen will happen while you rest. Because this comet that last appeared when your ancestors walked this earth 13 centuries ago has returned carrying the same message of abundance that it delivered to those who knew how to read the language of the stars. And Florence Scovel Shinn understood this language better than anyone in her time. And she would often tell her students that when heaven moves, earth must respond. And when the cosmos arranges itself in specific patterns, our financial circumstances must align with that higher order. And tonight, the cosmos has arranged itself for your prosperity in a way that will not happen again for 1,350 years. And this is why you are here. And this is why you were guided to these words. And this is why your soul knew to find this teaching at this precise moment in cosmic time. There was a woman whose name was Barbara, and she was 59 years old when she first understood what the heavens were saying about her prosperity. And this happened during the last appearance of a great comet. Not the Lemmon Comet, but another celestial messenger that had not been seen for generations. And Barbara lived in Tucson, Arizona, and it was 6:23 in the morning on a Tuesday in November when she first saw the comet hanging low in the eastern sky like a diamond needle stitched against the dark velvet of dawn, and the air was crisp and cold, exactly 42 degrees, and she could smell the desert sage and creosote carried on the wind, and she had awakened early, not by choice, but because worry had been her companion for months, keeping her awake with its constant whispers about bills and debts and the foreclosure notice that had arrived the previous week, threatening to take the house where she had raised her children and buried her husband's ashes in the small garden behind the kitchen. Barbara had been a mathematics teacher for 31 years at the same high school where she had started as a young woman of 22, full of dreams and optimism. But now at 59, she faced retirement with a pension that would not cover her mortgage and savings, depleted by her husband Robert's medical bills during his final illness 2 years earlier. And the house that had once represented security now felt like a millstone around her neck, because she owed $87,412 more than it was worth, and the bank had made it clear they would not extend her loan modification, and she had exactly 48 days before they would begin proceedings to take everything she had left of the life she and Robert had built together over 37 years of marriage. That morning, as she stood in her small backyard wearing her faded blue robe and her husband's old wool slippers, she had been praying not the formal prayers of her childhood, but the desperate bargaining of someone who had run out of options, asking the universe for a sign or a miracle or just enough time to figure out how to save her home. And that was when she noticed the comet appearing suddenly above the Catalina Mountains, as if in response to her plea. And something about its brilliance against the darkness made her remember the small book about Florence Scovel Shinn that her sister Nancy had given her months earlier, a book she had read once and then forgotten in the chaos of trying to survive her financial crisis and trying to make sense of a world that suddenly seemed hostile and unforgiving. Barbara had always been a practical woman who believed in hard work and careful planning and following the rules and doing the right thing, but all of her practical approaches had failed to solve the crisis she now faced, and she felt angry at herself for not seeing the financial disaster coming, and angry at the universe for allowing her husband to suffer and die despite their faithful adherence to medical advice and their careful attention to health insurance, and their belief that good people who work hard and follow the rules should be protected from such devastating losses. And she had spent months cycling through anger and despair and resignation, trying to accept that she would lose her home and have to start over at an age when starting over felt impossible. But something about the comet's sudden appearance in her darkest hour touched a place in her heart that had been closed since Robert's death. And as she stood in the cold desert morning, watching this celestial visitor, she felt a stirring of hope that she had thought was gone forever. And she remembered Nancy saying that the book contained teachings about how the universe responds to genuine need with miraculous supply, and how signs and synchronicities are evidence that invisible forces are working on our behalf, even when we cannot see or understand how they operate. And for the first time in months, Barbara felt a flicker of curiosity about possibilities beyond her current circumstances. Barbara went inside and found the book wedged between a cookbook and a collection of poems on the shelf above her kitchen table, and she opened it randomly to a page where Florence Scovel Shinn had written about divine signs and cosmic timing, and how the universe always responds to genuine need with miraculous supply. And as she read these words, while the comet blazed outside her window, she felt something shift inside her chest, like a lock turning or a door opening. And she spoke aloud to the empty kitchen words that came from somewhere deeper than her conscious mind, saying, "I do not know how, but I trust that the universe is already providing the solution to my financial situation, and it cannot be otherwise." She did not feel different immediately. In fact, she felt somewhat foolish, talking to herself in her kitchen while a comet shone outside, but she decided to continue reading the book and to watch the comet each morning as it grew brighter. And as she did this, something remarkable began to happen, not dramatically, but gradually, like the way dawn comes slowly and then suddenly fills the sky with light, because Barbara began to notice things she had missed before, like the envelope that arrived on Thursday from a law firm in Phoenix that she almost threw away, thinking it was another collection notice, but which turned out to be notification that her great-aunt Helen, whom she had met only twice as a child, had passed away and left her as sole beneficiary of an estate worth $137,896. The letter explained that Helen had been tracking down relatives for years before her death and had specifically chosen Barbara because she remembered her as the only family member who had written thank you notes for Christmas gifts and who had sent a sympathy card when Helen's husband died 15 years earlier, and the lawyer explained that the inheritance would be available within 30 days, which was exactly 18 days before the foreclosure deadline. And when Barbara called the number on the letter to verify this was not a scam, the lawyer confirmed every detail and sent her additional documentation that very afternoon by overnight delivery, along with copies of Helen's will and bank statements and investment records that proved the inheritance was legitimate and substantial. During the following weeks, as the comet continued its journey across the sky, Barbara found herself changing in subtle but profound ways, becoming less anxious about money and more trusting of life's natural abundance. And she began to notice opportunities everywhere, like the neighbor who mentioned needing a math tutor for her struggling grandson, leading to Barbara earning extra income doing something she loved, and the chance conversation with a friend at the grocery store that led to a part-time job at the community college, teaching adult education classes 3 evenings a week for additional money that would ensure her financial security going forward and make retirement not just survivable, but actually enjoyable and fulfilling. By the time the comet began to fade from view, Barbara had not only saved her house, but had also created multiple streams of income that would sustain her comfortably through retirement. And more importantly, she had developed an unshakable faith in what Florence Scovel Shinn called the law of supply, which states that the universe always provides for genuine need, often in ways we cannot anticipate or imagine. And Barbara would later tell friends that the comet had not caused her good fortune, but had simply helped her recognize and receive what had always been there, waiting for her to be ready to accept it, and that the real miracle was not the money, but the transformation of her consciousness from fear and scarcity to trust and abundance. If this teaching resonates with you, and if you feel you were guided here, then touch the subscribe button now. And it is not for me, but it is so that you receive each new teaching from Florence Scovel Shinn at the exact moment your soul needs it. Because these teachings work according to divine timing, and when you subscribe, you signal to the universe that you are ready to receive more, and you align yourself with thousands of other souls who are also opening to abundance and prosperity through these ancient, spiritual principles, and the algorithm becomes a tool of divine distribution, bringing you the right message at the right time, according to the perfect unfoldment of your prosperity consciousness and your willingness to receive what the universe has been preparing for you. And in the comments, write only 3 words, which are, "I am receiving now." And this is not an affirmation, but a decree. And when you write these words, you activate collective witness, and thousands of souls write these same words, and the field strengthens for everyone, because prosperity consciousness is not competitive, but collaborative. And when one person opens to abundance, it creates space for others to do the same. And the Lemmon Comet is witnessing your decree as you write it, and the stars are aligning to support your reception, and your willingness to declare your readiness becomes a cosmic invitation for supply to find you in whatever form serves your highest good and brings you joy and peace and fulfillment. If you choose not to do this right now, that is perfectly fine, and your path is your own. But know that this is the moment of greatest power, when the comet is speaking and when heaven is arranged for your prosperity. So do it if you feel aligned, and do it as an act of faith, not in me or in this teaching, but in the infinite intelligence that guided you here, and that is even now preparing to demonstrate its abundance through your life in ways that will surprise and delight you, and that will prove once and for all that you live in a universe that desires your prosperity, and that conspires constantly for your highest good, and that celebrates every step you take toward greater receiving and greater trust. Now you can relax completely, and you do not need to do anything else except listen and receive, because everything I will share enters you while you rest, and your subconscious is awake, and it absorbs every word, and it knows how to translate these spiritual principles into physical demonstrations of abundance in your life. And if you fall asleep in the middle, that is perfect, because when you wake, the seed will already be planted and the comet will have done its work, and your prosperity consciousness will be permanently expanded, and the universe will begin immediately to rearrange itself around your new level of receiving. And this happens automatically without your effort or your understanding, because it is a law as reliable as gravity and as certain as the sunrise. As you settle into this receptive state of consciousness, remember that Barbara's story is not unique, but rather represents the natural response of the universe. When someone opens their heart to cosmic guidance during moments of celestial significance, and throughout history, countless individuals have experienced similar transformations by aligning their consciousness with the energy of passing comets and allowing these rare cosmic events to serve as catalysts for breakthrough and renewal. And the reason these stories repeat across time and culture is that comets carry specific vibrational frequencies that can dissolve the barriers between ordinary human consciousness and the unlimited creative intelligence that governs all manifestation. The Lemmon Comet that now graces our sky carries the same transformative potential that has been available to humanity during every such celestial visitation. And as you listen to these words while resting in comfort and safety, your consciousness is naturally attuning itself to this cosmic frequency and preparing to receive whatever form of abundance serves your highest good and brings you the greatest joy and fulfillment. And this preparation happens beneath the level of conscious thought, working directly with the quantum field of possibility that exists beyond time and space and form. Your financial circumstances are not fixed or permanent, but rather fluid expressions of consciousness that can be transformed through alignment with universal principle and cosmic timing. And just as Barbara discovered that her apparent crisis was actually the universe's way of guiding her toward greater prosperity and security, your current challenges are likewise opportunities for expansion and demonstration that will prove beyond doubt that you live in a universe of infinite abundance and unlimited supply, and that your role is not to create prosperity, but rather to recognize and receive what has always been available to you. The Lemmon Comet serves as a cosmic reminder that the universe operates according to perfect timing, and that what appears to be delay or obstacle is often divine orchestration, ensuring that your demonstration arrives at exactly the moment when you are ready to receive it with gratitude and grace and understanding. And this timing is never arbitrary, but always serves your spiritual evolution and your growing recognition of your unlimited nature and your eternal connection to the source of all good. As sleep claims your conscious mind, your soul remains alert and receptive to the cosmic communications that flow continuously from the infinite intelligence that loves you unconditionally and desires your prosperity and happiness and success and fulfillment. And during these precious hours of rest, the Lemmon Comet's energy will work with your subconscious beliefs and patterns, reorganizing them according to the template of abundance and worthiness, and trust that Florence Scovel Shinn understood to be your birthright as a beloved child of an abundant universe. While you rest now, allow your consciousness to drift back in time to the early 1900s, when the city of New York pulsed with a different rhythm, and the night skies were darker and the stars more visible. And it was in this time and place that a remarkable woman named Florence Scovel Shinn began to understand the connection between celestial events and earthly prosperity. And she was not born into this understanding, but discovered it through careful observation and practical application during an era when such ideas were considered radical and revolutionary, and when women were expected to remain silent about spiritual matters and to leave such discussions to men of the cloth. Florence Scovel was born in 1860 in Camden, New Jersey, during a time when the nation was torn by civil war and social upheaval, and when traditional beliefs about prosperity and spirituality were being challenged by rapid industrialization and scientific discoveries. And she grew up in a Presbyterian household where faith was important, but where material abundance was often viewed with suspicion as potentially corrupting to the soul, and where the prevailing belief was that suffering and sacrifice were necessary for spiritual growth, and that prosperity was something to be earned through hard work and moral virtue, rather than received through spiritual understanding. She studied art at the Pennsylvania Academy of Fine Arts, where she met and later married Everett Shinn, who would become a famous painter and member of the Ashcan School. But it was not art that would make Florence famous, but rather her discoveries about the invisible laws that govern prosperity and abundance, and how these laws respond to celestial influences in ways that most people never recognize or understand. And her journey from conventional religious belief to metaphysical understanding began during a period of personal financial struggle, when traditional approaches to solving money problems had proven inadequate. During the winter of 1910, New York City was buzzing with excitement and fear because Halley's Comet was approaching Earth for its regular 76-year return, and newspapers were filled with dire predictions about the end of the world, and people were stocking food and water, and some were even building underground shelters and purchasing gas masks because scientists had discovered that the comet's tail contained poisonous gases, and there was widespread belief that when Earth passed through the tail's influence, the atmosphere would be contaminated and millions would die from cyanogen poisoning, and various cults and religious groups proclaimed that the comet's return signaled the final judgment and the end of human civilization. But Florence Scovel Shinn saw something entirely different in this celestial visitor, and she began to teach her students that comets were not harbingers of doom, but rather cosmic messengers announcing periods of increased spiritual power and accelerated manifestation. And she would tell them that when heaven moves dramatically, Earth must respond with equal drama, and that those who understood this principle could align themselves with cosmic forces to create miraculous demonstrations of supply and abundance, and that the same energy that terrified the masses could be harnessed by those with spiritual understanding to create positive transformation in their lives. Florence had developed her understanding through years of studying metaphysical principles and working with students who came to her seeking solutions to financial problems and relationship difficulties and health challenges. And through this work, she had begun to recognize patterns in how the universe responds to human need and desire. And she noticed that certain times seemed to amplify the power of prayer and decree, and that celestial events, particularly the appearance of comets, created windows of heightened receptivity when the impossible became possible and the miraculous became commonplace, and when ordinary people could achieve extraordinary results through the application of spiritual law. The principle that Florence discovered and taught was beautifully simple, yet profoundly powerful, and she expressed it in these exact words: "The universe is a vast cosmic machine designed to bring about the fulfillment of your heart's desires. And when the heavens move in extraordinary ways, they create extraordinary opportunities for earthly demonstration." And this is why ancient peoples watched the sky so carefully, because they understood that heaven and earth are not separate realms, but rather different aspects of one unified field of consciousness. And what happens in one realm must eventually manifest in the other according to laws as precise and reliable as mathematics. She would explain to her students that comets in particular served as cosmic amplifiers, strengthening the connection between thought and manifestation and making it easier for sincere desires to overcome the resistance of limited thinking and negative belief patterns. And she taught that during the appearance of a great comet like Halley's, a single decree spoken with genuine faith could accomplish what might otherwise require months or years of persistent affirmation and visualization. And this was not superstition, but rather practical metaphysics, based on her observation of how cosmic rhythms influence the subtle energies that shape our physical experience. There was a man whose name was William, and he was 62 years old when he first heard Florence Scovel Shinn speak about the relationship between comets and prosperity. And this was in April of 1910, just weeks before Halley's Comet would reach its closest approach to Earth. And William had attended the lecture reluctantly at the insistence of his wife Margaret, who had been studying with Florence for several months and trying to convince her husband that these spiritual principles could solve their mounting financial problems, which had reached a crisis point after William's small import business had been devastated by economic upheaval and changing trade policies that had disrupted international commerce. William owned a modest warehouse in Lower Manhattan, where he stored and distributed fine fabrics and textiles imported from Europe and Asia. And for 15 years, this business had provided a comfortable living for his family, allowing them to maintain a pleasant home in Brooklyn Heights and to send their 3 children to good schools and to save money for their eventual retirement. But the financial panic of 1907 had disrupted international trade, and new tariff laws had made his inventory prohibitively expensive, and his longtime customers had begun buying from larger competitors who could afford to absorb the increased costs and who had political connections that allowed them to navigate the changing regulations more effectively. By the spring of 1910, William owed $23,847 to various creditors, including his fabric suppliers in France and Belgium, and his landlord who was threatening eviction, and the bank that had financed his inventory purchases, and he faced the prospect of losing everything he had worked to build and having to declare bankruptcy and start over at an age when starting over seemed impossible and frightening, and he had exhausted all conventional solutions, including attempting to renegotiate payment terms and seeking additional investors, and exploring the possibility of selling the business to a larger competitor. That evening at Florence's lecture, which was held in a small rented hall on the Upper East Side, William sat in the back row with his arms crossed and his mind closed, convinced that he was wasting valuable time that could be better spent trying to solve his problems through conventional means like negotiating with creditors or finding new sources of inventory, or perhaps declaring bankruptcy and starting over with whatever capital he could salvage from the wreckage of his current business, and he listened impatiently as Florence spoke about universal laws and cosmic timing and the power of the spoken word to transform external circumstances. And he was preparing to leave early when she began to speak specifically about the approaching comet and its significance for those facing financial challenges. Florence explained that Halley's comet had appeared throughout history at moments of great transformation, and that its return always coincided with shifts in human consciousness that created new possibilities for prosperity and abundance. And she told the audience that the comet's energy would be strongest during the 2 weeks surrounding its closest approach to Earth, which would occur on May 18th, and that during this period, anyone who could align their consciousness with cosmic purpose and decree their prosperity with absolute faith would see rapid and dramatic results. And she emphasized that this was not a matter of belief, but of understanding natural law, and that the comet's influence would work regardless of whether people believed in it, just as gravity works, whether or not we understand physics. Something in Florence's voice and presence penetrated William's skepticism, and he found himself leaning forward in his chair and listening more carefully as she continued to explain the practical application of these principles. And she said that the key was not to ask for specific solutions, but rather to declare one's faith in the universe's infinite capacity to provide and to maintain that declaration with unwavering consistency until the demonstration appeared. And she warned that the ego would try to figure out how the solution would come and would become impatient when results did not appear immediately, but that those who could maintain their decree with quiet confidence would be amazed by the universe's creative power to solve problems in ways that human intelligence could never devise. After the lecture, William found himself walking slowly through the streets of Manhattan, thinking about what he had heard and feeling an unfamiliar stirring of hope in his chest. And when he arrived home, Margaret asked about the lecture, and William surprised himself by saying that he wanted to try Florence's approach, and that very night, sitting in his study, surrounded by ledgers and bills and collection, notices he spoke aloud for the first time in his life words that came from somewhere deeper than his rational mind, saying the universe is already providing the perfect solution to my financial situation. And this solution comes in ways I cannot imagine, and it arrives at exactly the right time, and it cannot be otherwise. For the next 2 weeks, as Halley's comet blazed across the night sky, William repeated this decree every morning upon waking and every evening before sleep and during the day. Whenever worry or fear threatened to overwhelm him, and at first, nothing seemed to change. In fact, his situation appeared to worsen as 2 more customers canceled their orders and another creditor threatened legal action. But William continued his practice with growing conviction, remembering Florence's warning that appearances often become more challenging just before the breakthrough occurs, as the old conditions resist being replaced by new ones, and as the universe tests our faith and commitment to the new understanding we are seeking to embody. On May 17th, the day before the comet's closest approach, William received an unexpected visitor at his warehouse, a distinguished gentleman in an expensive suit, who introduced himself as Thomas Richardson, representing a consortium of wealthy investors who were planning to open a chain of high-end department stores in major American cities, and who needed a reliable supplier of quality fabrics and textiles, and who had been referred to William by a former customer who had spoken highly of his integrity and expertise, and his ability to source unique materials that were not available through larger suppliers, and his willingness to work personally with clients to ensure their complete satisfaction. Thomas explained that the consortium was prepared to place initial orders totaling $49,632 worth of merchandise, and to establish William as their exclusive supplier for certain categories of goods, and to provide advance payments that would allow him to purchase inventory without the usual financial risk. And the terms they offered were more generous than any William had ever received, including payment schedules that would solve his immediate cash flow problems and profit margins that would restore his business to profitability within 6 months and create the foundation for expansion into new markets and new product lines. As Thomas spoke, William felt a tingling sensation throughout his body and a profound sense of recognition, as if this moment had been orchestrated by some cosmic intelligence. And he remembered Florence's words about the universe's creative power to solve problems in ways that human intelligence could never devise. And he realized that not only was his financial crisis being resolved, but his business was being elevated to a level of success he had never dared to imagine. And when Thomas left after they had shaken hands on the agreement, William stood alone in his warehouse and looked up through the skylight at the brilliant comet hanging in the afternoon sky, and he whispered thank you to whatever force had answered his decree with such precision and generosity. Within 90 days, William's business had been completely transformed from struggling to survive to thriving beyond his previous dreams, and he became one of Florence Scovel Shinn's most devoted students and eventually a teacher himself, helping others to understand the connection between cosmic, timing, and earthly demonstration. And he would often tell people that the comet had not caused his success, but had simply provided a window of heightened possibility during which his decree could manifest with unusual speed and power. And he never forgot the lesson that when heaven moves dramatically, those who understand spiritual law can ride those cosmic currents to new levels of prosperity and abundance. This principle that Florence taught about celestial events and earthly demonstration is based on the understanding that consciousness is the fundamental substance of the universe, and that physical conditions are simply the outward expression of invisible mental and spiritual causes. And just as the moon influences the tides and the sun affects the growth of plants, cosmic events like the appearance of a great comet create energetic shifts that make it easier for new thoughts and beliefs to override old patterns and manifest as changed circumstances. And this is why ancient civilizations paid such careful attention to the movements of celestial bodies, and why modern astrology, despite its commercialized distortions, still contains kernels of profound truth about the relationship between cosmic rhythms and human experience. While you sleep, your subconscious mind is naturally aligned with these cosmic rhythms and can absorb and integrate this understanding without the interference of your rational mind, which often resists ideas that cannot be proven through conventional logic. And during sleep, your consciousness joins the collective field of awareness, where all possibilities exist simultaneously, and where the Lemmon Comet's energy can directly influence your receptivity to abundance and prosperity. And this is why so many breakthrough insights and creative solutions occur during sleep or upon waking, because the subconscious mind has access to intelligence and resources that the waking mind cannot perceive or utilize. The teachings of Florence Scovel Shinn about cosmic timing and celestial influence represent a return to ancient wisdom that was once common knowledge among those who understood the intimate connection between heaven and earth, and between consciousness and manifestation. And her rediscovery of these principles during the early 1900s came at a time when humanity was beginning to lose touch with the natural rhythms and cosmic correspondences that had guided human civilization for thousands of years, and her work serves as a bridge between the mystical understanding of our ancestors and the practical needs of modern seekers who desire to create abundance and prosperity through spiritual means. William's transformation during the appearance of Halley's Comet demonstrates that financial crisis often precedes financial breakthrough, because the universe uses apparent obstacles to redirect our attention away from limited human solutions and toward the unlimited creative intelligence that can solve any problem in ways that exceed our imagination and expectations. And this process requires faith not in specific outcomes, but in the perfect wisdom and timing of universal law, and the willingness to maintain our spiritual practice even when external appearances suggest that our efforts are failing. The energy of the Lemmon Comet amplifies this process by creating a resonance field that makes it easier for consciousness to override the gravitational pull of old patterns and beliefs, and to establish new templates of receiving and abundance and worthiness. And this amplification effect will be strongest during the weeks surrounding the comet's closest approach to Earth, but its influence will continue to reverberate through your consciousness for months to come as the seeds planted during this cosmic window begin to germinate and grow and manifest as tangible improvements in your financial circumstances and your overall quality of life. As you rest in the peaceful receptivity of sleep, your consciousness naturally attunes itself to the frequencies of abundance and prosperity that the comet carries from the far reaches of space and time. And these frequencies work directly with your unconscious beliefs and patterns, dissolving those that limit your receiving and strengthening those that support your recognition of yourself as a natural channel for universal supply. And this process happens gradually and gently, so that your human personality can integrate the changes without feeling overwhelmed or destabilized by the magnitude of the transformation occurring within your consciousness. Tomorrow when you wake, you may not feel dramatically different, but something within you will have shifted, and over the coming days and weeks, you will begin to notice subtle changes in how you think about money and opportunity, and your own worthiness to receive. And these changes will create a magnetic field around you that attracts people and circumstances and resources that can help you demonstrate the abundance that has always been your birthright as an individualized expression of infinite creative intelligence and unlimited cosmic supply. As you continue to rest and receive, allow your awareness to expand beyond the boundaries of ordinary thinking, and consider the possibility that the Lemmon Comet now traveling through our solar system is not merely a chunk of ice and rock following a predictable orbit, but rather a cosmic transmitter broadcasting specific frequencies that can restructure the vibrational field around your financial circumstances and your capacity to receive abundance. And this understanding moves us beyond the realm of wishful thinking into the territory of vibrational science, where thought and word and cosmic influence combine to create demonstrable changes in physical reality, and where the spoken decree becomes a tool of creation more powerful than any material instrument or conventional strategy. Florence Scovel Shinn understood that spoken words are not simply sounds that convey meaning, but actual vibrational forces that rearrange the molecular structure of the universe around us. And she taught that when we speak with conviction and faith, we literally command the atoms and electrons of physical matter to reorganize themselves according to our decree. And this is not metaphorical language, but precise description of how consciousness interacts with the quantum field that underlies all material manifestation. And modern physics has begun to validate what ancient mystics and metaphysical teachers like Florence have always known, that observation and intention influence reality at the most fundamental level, and that the boundary between observer and observed dissolves when consciousness is properly understood and applied. The word is not description but creation, because in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. And this biblical reference that Florence often quoted reveals the understanding that consciousness, expressing itself through sound and vibration, is the primary creative force in the universe. And when we speak, we are not merely describing existing conditions, but rather calling new conditions into existence through the power of focused intention combined with audible vibration. And this is why Florence emphasized the importance of speaking our decrees aloud rather than simply thinking them. Because the physical act of vocalization creates resonance patterns that extend beyond our individual consciousness into the collective field where all manifestation begins and where the impossible becomes inevitable through proper alignment with cosmic law. What makes the Lemmon Comet particularly significant for prosperity consciousness is that comets are natural amplifiers of vibrational transmission, carrying energetic frequencies across vast distances through space and time. And when a comet passes near Earth, it creates what metaphysical science calls a resonance bridge between cosmic intelligence and terrestrial consciousness, allowing our individual intentions to connect with universal creative forces in ways that would otherwise require years of disciplined spiritual practice to achieve. And this is why, throughout history, the appearance of great comets has coincided with periods of accelerated spiritual awakening and material transformation, and why those who understand these principles can use such cosmic events to accomplish in weeks what might otherwise take months or years of persistent effort. There was a man whose name was Richard, and he was 55 years old when he first discovered the power of decreeing prosperity during the passage of a celestial messenger. And this happened not with the Lemmon Comet, but during the appearance of Comet Hale-Bopp in 1997, when Richard was facing the most challenging financial crisis of his adult life and questioning everything he had believed about success and security and his ability to provide for his family and create the future he had always envisioned for himself and those he loved. And his story illustrates perfectly how the vibrational frequency of comets can amplify the power of spoken decrees and accelerate manifestation in ways that seem miraculous, but are actually the natural result of aligning human consciousness with cosmic intelligence. Richard had been a successful real estate developer in Phoenix, Arizona for nearly 20 years, building strip malls and office complexes and residential subdivisions that had generated millions of dollars in profits and allowed him to accumulate substantial wealth and to enjoy a lifestyle that included a large home in Scottsdale with a swimming pool and tennis court and vacation properties in California and Colorado and private school educations for his 3 children and all the material comforts that money could provide. And he had believed that his success was the result of his own intelligence and hard work and business acumen, and that as long as he continued to apply these qualities, he would continue to prosper and achieve his goals. But the economic recession of the early 1990s had devastated the Arizona real estate market, and Richard had made a series of investments based on projections that proved to be wildly optimistic and assumptions about market conditions that turned out to be completely wrong. And by the spring of 1997, he was facing bankruptcy and the loss of everything he had worked to build and the humiliation of admitting to his family and colleagues that the success they had admired and envied was about to collapse into failure and financial ruin, and that the man they had trusted to provide security and stability was powerless to prevent the destruction of everything they had counted on. The crisis had begun 3 years earlier, when Richard had borrowed $8,400,000 to purchase and develop a tract of land on the outskirts of Phoenix that he planned to transform into an upscale residential community with golf course and country club amenities, and the project had seemed like a guaranteed success because similar developments in the area had sold quickly and profitably, and Richard's bank had been eager to finance the venture based on his track record and the apparent strength of the local real estate market, and the optimistic projections of economists and real estate experts who predicted continued growth and prosperity for the region. But within months of breaking ground, the market had begun to soften, and potential buyers had become scarce and cautious, and sales had slowed to a trickle, and Richard had continued to pour money into the project, hoping that market conditions would improve and that the substantial investment he had already made could be salvaged. But with each passing month, the situation had grown more desperate, as carrying costs consumed his cash reserves and interest payments on his loans exceeded his income from other sources, and by early 1997, he was spending sleepless nights calculating and recalculating numbers that never seemed to add up to anything but financial ruin. Richard had exhausted all conventional options, including refinancing and seeking additional investors and negotiating with creditors and exploring the possibility of finding a buyer for the unfinished development. And his attorneys had advised him that bankruptcy was inevitable and that he should begin preparing for the legal proceedings that would strip him of his assets and leave him starting over at an age when starting over seemed impossible, and his wife Linda had suggested that they sell their personal residence and liquidate their retirement accounts to try to satisfy their creditors. But even these drastic measures would not have been sufficient to cover the enormous debt that had accumulated. It was during this period of intense stress and uncertainty that Richard's sister Carol, who lived in Santa Fe, had given him a book about metaphysical approaches to financial problems, and although Richard considered himself a practical man who trusted only in hard work and smart business decisions, He was desperate enough to try anything that might offer hope or guidance, and the book included several chapters about the work of Florence Scovel Shinn and her teachings about the power of the spoken word to transform material circumstances. And as Richard read these teachings, while Comet Hale Bop blazed across the desert sky, he felt something stir within him that he could not quite name or understand. Florence had written that the universe operates according to precise laws that are as reliable as the laws of physics, but that govern the realm of consciousness and manifestation rather than mechanical cause and effect. And she taught that when we align our words with universal principle and speak our decrees with absolute conviction, we literally command the invisible forces of creation to rearrange physical circumstances according to our highest good. And Richard found himself drawn to this idea, even though it challenged everything he had believed about how the world works and how success is achieved and how problems are solved through human effort and intelligence. On the night of March 22nd, as Comet Hale Bop reached its brightest magnitude, Richard drove out into the desert north of Phoenix and parked his car on a hill where he could see the comet clearly in the northwestern sky. And for the first time in his adult life, he spoke aloud to the universe, saying words that came from desperation and hope combined. I do not understand how this works, but I trust that infinite intelligence is already providing the perfect solution to my financial situation. And this solution comes in ways that serve everyone involved, and it cannot be otherwise. And as he spoke these words while gazing at the comet, he felt a shift in his consciousness, like a door opening or a weight lifting. And although nothing changed in his external circumstances that night, he began to repeat this decree every morning and evening while the comet remained visible. At first, Richard's rational mind resisted this practice, telling him that he was wasting time that could be better spent making phone calls and attending meetings and pursuing conventional solutions. But he continued the decree because something about the combination of his words and the comet's presence created a sense of peace and possibility that he had not experienced. In months and as days passed, he began to notice subtle changes in his thinking and perception, becoming less anxious about the future and more open to unexpected possibilities and less attached to specific outcomes and more trusting of the process, even when he could not see how things would work out. 3 weeks after he began his nightly practice, Richard received a phone call from a man named David Chen, who represented a group of investors from Hong Kong who were looking for American real estate opportunities and who had heard about Richard's development through a complex network of international business connections that seemed to have materialized out of nowhere. And David explained that his clients were interested in purchasing the property as is for conversion into a different type of project. And after several days of negotiations, they offered $11,700,000 for the land and the completed portions of the development, which was $3,300,000 more than Richard owed on his various loans. The sale not only eliminated Richard's debt, but left him with enough capital to start fresh and to pursue new projects with hard-won wisdom about risk management and market timing. And he later calculated that the price his buyers paid was exactly what he would have needed to achieve his original financial goals if the development had been completed and sold as originally planned. And he realized that the universe had found a way to give him the result he wanted while removing him from a situation that had become unsustainable and stressful and potentially ruinous to his health and family relationships. Richard became a student of Florence Scovel Shinn's teachings and eventually incorporated her principles into his business practices and personal life. And he would often tell people that the comet had not caused his miraculous sale, but had rather served as a cosmic amplifier that strengthened his decree and helped him maintain faith during the period when external conditions appeared hopeless. And he learned that prosperity consciousness is not about forcing specific outcomes, but about aligning with universal intelligence and trusting that solutions exist even when human logic cannot perceive them. The power of decreeing during celestial events, like the passage of the Lemmon Comet, lies in the understanding that consciousness and cosmos are not separate phenomena, but rather different aspects of one unified field of creative intelligence, and when a comet passes near Earth, it creates what metaphysical science calls a resonance window, during which individual consciousness can more easily access and direct universal creative forces. And this is why ancient peoples considered comets to be messengers from the gods, because they recognized that these celestial visitors carried information and energy that could accelerate spiritual evolution and material transformation. The vibrational frequency that Richard accessed during his practice represents what Florence Scovel Shinn called the tone of realization, which is the specific energetic signature that consciousness must achieve in order to command matter and circumstance. And when this tone is sustained through repeated decree and supported by cosmic amplification, it becomes irresistible to the creative forces of the universe, which must respond according to the law of correspondence that governs all manifestation. And this law states that as above, so below, and as within, so without, meaning that external conditions must eventually reflect internal states of consciousness. The ancient understanding that Florence Scovel Shinn rediscovered teaches us that comets are not random visitors, but purposeful messengers carrying specific vibrational blueprints that can restructure human consciousness at the deepest levels. And the Lemmon Comet's 1,350-year orbital period means that it carries memories and frequencies from civilizations that understood prosperity consciousness in ways that modern humanity has largely forgotten. And as this comet passes through our solar system, it is broadcasting these ancient prosperity codes directly into the collective consciousness of Earth, creating an unprecedented opportunity for financial awakening and transformation. During sleep tonight, your consciousness will naturally attune itself to these cosmic frequencies and begin the process of vibrational alignment that will continue for months to come as the seeds planted during this celestial window slowly germinate and grow into tangible demonstrations of abundance in your physical reality. And this process happens without your conscious effort or understanding, because it operates according to universal laws that are far more reliable than any human strategy or conventional approach to creating prosperity. The vibrational transmission from the Lemmon Comet works directly with your unconscious beliefs about money and worthiness and success, dissolving the limiting patterns that have kept you trapped in cycles of financial struggle and replacing them with new templates of receiving and abundance that align with your true cosmic nature as an unlimited being temporarily experiencing human form. And this transformation happens gradually and gently so that your personality can integrate the changes without resistance or destabilization. You do not need to understand how this process works or to monitor its progress, because it operates according to natural law just as surely as seeds grow into plants without conscious supervision. And the Lemmon Comet serves as a cosmic catalyst, activating dormant potentials within your consciousness and helping you step into the full realization of your identity as a beloved child of an abundant universe that delights in providing for your every need and that celebrates your willingness to receive its infinite gifts with gratitude and grace. Deep within your sleeping consciousness, there exists a truth so fundamental and so powerful that once awakened, it transforms everything about how you experience prosperity and abundance. And this truth was understood by Florence Scovel Shinn and taught by her with passionate conviction because she had seen its demonstration again and again in the lives of her students. And the truth is simply this: you do not attract what you want, but you attract what you are. And more specifically, you are not a human being trying to become prosperous, but rather you are a cosmic being temporarily experiencing humanity. And your true nature is that of an unlimited receiver connected to infinite supply through invisible channels that extend beyond the boundaries of time and space and matter. This understanding moves us far beyond the limited thinking that sees prosperity as something external that must be pursued or achieved or earned through struggle and effort, and instead reveals prosperity as the natural expression of your authentic identity as a you, individualized center of universal consciousness. And Florence would often tell her students that poverty and lack are not natural conditions, but rather temporary illusions created by mistaken beliefs about separation and limitation and scarcity. and that when these false beliefs are replaced by recognition of your true cosmic nature, abundance flows as naturally as water flows downhill, because it is simply returning to its source. The principle that identity precedes manifestation is beautifully illustrated in Florence's teaching that you must first become in consciousness what you wish to experience in physical reality. And this becoming is not a process of changing yourself, but rather a process of remembering what you have always been beneath the layers of conditioning and programming and fear-based thinking that have obscured your recognition of your unlimited nature. And when you treat yourself as the prosperous being you truly are, the universe has no choice but to confirm this. Identity through external demonstration, because consciousness is the primary creative force, and physical conditions must eventually align with authentic self-recognition. What makes this moment particularly powerful for identity transformation is that the Lemmon Comet is broadcasting frequencies that can help dissolve the false beliefs that have kept you feeling separate from universal abundance. And as these frequencies penetrate your consciousness during sleep, they activate dormant memories of your cosmic heritage and your unlimited capacity to receive and your natural connection to the inexhaustible wealth of the universe. And this activation happens gradually and gently, so that your human personality can integrate the expansion without feeling overwhelmed or destabilized by the magnitude of what you are remembering about yourself. There was a woman whose name was Dorothy, and she was 63 years old when she experienced the most profound identity shift of her lifetime. And this transformation occurred during the appearance of a bright comet in the constellation of Perseus during the winter of 2001, when Dorothy was facing what appeared to be an impossible financial situation that threatened to destroy everything she had worked to build during her career as a teacher and administrator in the public school system of Detroit, Michigan, where she had devoted 41 years to educating children and supporting families and contributing to her community in ways that brought her deep satisfaction but very modest financial rewards. Dorothy had always lived simply and carefully, managing her modest salary and contributing faithfully to her pension fund and saving what little she could for her eventual retirement. But a series of unexpected expenses had devastated her financial security, beginning with her mother's extended illness that required expensive care not covered by insurance, and continuing with major repairs to her home after a severe storm damaged the roof and plumbing and electrical systems, and culminating with the shocking discovery that the school district's pension fund had been mismanaged and that her expected retirement benefits would be reduced by 67%, leaving her with barely enough income to cover basic living expenses. At 63, Dorothy felt too old to start a new career and too young to qualify for full Social Security benefits, and she had exhausted her savings caring for her mother, who had passed away 6 months earlier, leaving Dorothy not only grief-stricken, but also financially vulnerable in ways she had never imagined possible during all those years of careful planning and responsible financial management. And she found herself contemplating the possibility of selling her home and moving to a smaller apartment, or perhaps relocating to a state with lower cost of living, even though Detroit had been her home for her entire adult life and contained all her connections and memories and sense of belonging. It was Dorothy's neighbor Helen who introduced her to the teachings of Florence Scovel Shinn during a conversation over coffee one December morning, when Dorothy had finally broken down and shared the depth of her financial crisis and her fears about the future. And Helen listened with compassion and then quietly retrieved a small worn book from her purse and said that she had been studying these teachings for many years and had seen their power to transform seemingly impossible situations through shifts in consciousness and identity rather than through conventional problem solving, and that perhaps Dorothy might find hope and guidance in these principles that had been tested and proven by thousands of people over many decades. Helen explained that Florence Scovel Shinn taught a revolutionary understanding of human nature that most people never discover because they are too focused on external circumstances to recognize the unlimited being that exists within them. And she said that according to this teaching, Dorothy was not a retired teacher facing poverty, but rather an eternal being, temporarily experiencing financial challenges as part of her spiritual curriculum, and that her true identity was that of a cosmic receiver connected to infinite abundance through channels that could be activated through proper understanding and declaration, and that once these channels were opened, the flow of supply would begin immediately and continue as long as her consciousness remained aligned with her true nature. That evening, as the comet blazed in the winter sky, Dorothy sat alone in her small living room, reading the book Helen had given her, and feeling something stir within her consciousness, like a memory returning after long absence. And she came across a passage where Florence had written that every soul is born into this world as a natural receiver of all good, and that poverty and limitation are learned responses that can be unlearned through recognition of one's divine inheritance and authentic cosmic identity. And as Dorothy read these words, she felt tears streaming down her face because something deep inside her recognized the truth of what she was reading, even though her rational mind could not understand how such beautiful ideas could possibly be practical or realistic. Florence had explained that the universe sees each individual not as a struggling human being, but as a beloved child of infinite abundance, entitled to receive all good things simply by virtue of existing, and that the key to demonstrating this truth is to begin treating yourself as the unlimited being you actually are, rather than as the limited personality you have been conditioned to believe yourself to be. And this meant speaking to yourself and about yourself in ways that acknowledge your cosmic heritage and your natural capacity to receive, rather than focusing on temporary appearances of lack or limitation. Dorothy decided to experiment with this teaching, and that very night, as she prepared for bed, she looked at herself in the bathroom mirror and spoke aloud words that felt strange and wonderful, at the same time saying, "I am a daughter of the universe, and all of creation conspires to support my highest good, and I am a natural receiver of abundance and prosperity, flows to me from sources I have not yet imagined, and it cannot be otherwise." And as she spoke these words, while the comet shone through her bedroom window, she felt a shift in her entire being, like stepping from a small room into a vast cathedral. For the next several weeks, Dorothy continued this practice of declaring her cosmic identity each morning, upon waking, and each evening before sleep, and during the day, whenever fear or worry attempted to convince her that she was helpless or hopeless. She would remember Helen's words about being a temporary human experiencing eternal abundance, rather than a temporary human trying to become abundant. And this simple shift in perspective began to change everything about how she moved through her days, and how she responded to opportunities, and how she thought about her future. The first sign of transformation came when Dorothy decided to attend a holiday party for retired teachers that she had initially planned to skip because she felt embarrassed about her financial situation and could not afford to bring an expensive gift. But at the party, she met a woman named Susan, who mentioned that she was starting a tutoring service for children whose parents could afford private help with their studies, and Susan asked if Dorothy would be interested in working as an independent contractor, helping students with reading and mathematics. And the hourly rate Susan offered was more than Dorothy had ever earned as a classroom teacher. Within a month, Dorothy was working 20 hours per week with students whose parents were delighted to find such an experienced and caring educator, and the income from tutoring not only covered her immediate expenses, but also allowed her to begin rebuilding her savings account. And more importantly, the work filled her with renewed sense of purpose and usefulness and connection to the community she loved. And as winter progressed and the comet continued its journey across the sky, Dorothy found herself attracting additional opportunities to share her skills and knowledge in ways that generated income while serving others. A local community college asked her to teach evening classes for adults who were preparing for their high school equivalency exams, and a nonprofit organization hired her to develop literacy programs for senior citizens. And a wealthy family approached her about providing private lessons for their grandson, who was struggling with learning disabilities, and each of these opportunities seemed to appear effortlessly, as if drawn to her by some invisible magnetism that had been activated when she began identifying herself as a cosmic receiver rather than a struggling retiree. By spring, Dorothy's monthly income had tripled from her pension alone, and she had accumulated enough savings to feel secure about her future, and to begin considering possibilities she had never dared to imagine, like taking educational trips and supporting causes she cared about, and even starting a small scholarship fund to help other teachers facing unexpected financial hardships. And she realized that the transformation had begun not with any external change, but with her recognition and declaration of her true identity as an unlimited being, temporarily experiencing human form. Dorothy continued to study Florence Scovel Shinn's teachings and eventually became a teacher herself, sharing these principles with other retirees and helping them recognize their own cosmic identity and unlimited capacity to receive. And she would often tell people that the comet had not brought her prosperity, but had rather provided the cosmic encouragement she needed to remember who she truly was beneath all the conditioning and programming that had taught her to see herself as limited and separate from universal abundance. This principle of cosmic identity that Florence taught so passionately is based on the understanding that consciousness is not produced by the brain, but rather exists as a fundamental field of intelligence that individuates itself through infinite forms while remaining eternally connected to its source. And your human personality is like a character in a play, performed by an actor who remains unchanged regardless of the role being portrayed. And when you recognize yourself as the actor rather than the character, you gain access to resources and possibilities that exist beyond the limitations of any particular role. Your financial identity, your professional identity, your social identity are all temporary costumes worn by the eternal being that you actually are. And when you begin to identify with the eternal being, rather than the temporary costumes, you naturally begin to receive the abundance that has always been your birthright as an individualized expression of infinite creative intelligence. And this reception happens automatically because the universe recognizes and responds to authentic identity rather than to the masks and personas that most people present to the world. There was another woman whose name was Margaret, and she was 58 years old when she discovered that her identity as a struggling single mother was not her true nature, but rather a temporary role she had been playing. And this discovery came during a particularly difficult period when she was working 2 jobs to support her teenage daughter and still falling behind on bills and feeling exhausted and hopeless about ever achieving financial stability. And it was during this crisis that she encountered Florence Scovel Shinn's teaching about cosmic identity and began to experiment with declaring herself as a natural receiver of abundance. Margaret had been divorced for 12 years and had received no support from her ex-husband, who had disappeared shortly after their divorce, leaving her to raise their daughter Linda alone. And she had worked as a medical secretary during the day and cleaned offices in the evening to make ends meet. But despite her dedication and hard work, she never seemed to get ahead financially and was constantly worried about unexpected expenses and her daughter's college tuition and her own retirement, which seemed impossible given her current circumstances. But when Margaret began to declare herself as a cosmic receiver and to treat herself as an unlimited being, temporarily experiencing financial challenge, her entire energy field shifted, and within weeks, she received an offer to manage the office of a busy medical practice with a salary that was 50% higher than her combined income from both previous jobs. And the position came with excellent benefits and the opportunity for advancement and profit sharing that would allow her to save for the future while providing comfortably for her daughter's education. There was also a man whose name was Charles, and he was 64 years old when he discovered that his financial struggles were not caused by external circumstances, but by his mistaken identity as someone who had to work hard and sacrifice to earn his living. And this discovery came during a period when he was facing unemployment after his company downsized and eliminated his position, after 28 years of faithful service, and he was feeling too old to find new employment and too young to retire, and it seemed as though his career and his financial security had ended simultaneously, leaving him facing an uncertain and frightening future. Charles had always been a responsible man who believed in the Protestant work ethic and the idea that success comes to those who apply themselves diligently and follow the rules and pay their taxes and save their money. And he had done all of these things faithfully for decades. And yet, now at 64, he found himself without income and without prospects and questioning everything he had believed about how the world works and how good people are rewarded for their efforts and dedication. But when Charles began to study the teachings of Florence Scovel Shinn and to experiment with declaring himself as a cosmic receiver rather than a discarded employee, his entire energy field shifted, and within months he had created a consulting business that generated more income than his previous job, while allowing him to work flexible hours and choose his clients and projects. And he realized that his forced retirement had actually been the universe's way of moving him toward greater freedom and prosperity than he had ever experienced as an employee. The transformation that Dorothy and Margaret and Charles experienced demonstrates that age and circumstances are not barriers to prosperity when consciousness is properly aligned with cosmic identity, and the Lemmon Comet's energy amplifies this understanding by dissolving the false beliefs about limitation and scarcity that keep people trapped in cycles of financial struggle regardless of their age or background or previous experience, and helping them recognize their unlimited capacity to receive abundance from sources they have never imagined or considered. The cosmic identity that you are remembering through the influence of the Lemmon Comet is not something new that you must create, but rather something eternal that you must simply recognize and claim. And this recognition changes everything about how you experience your relationship with money and abundance. Because when you know yourself as a cosmic receiver connected to infinite supply, you naturally begin to expect good things to come to you. And this expectation becomes a powerful magnetic force that draws to you exactly what you need when you need it in ways that often surprise and delight you. Your true identity as a cosmic receiver is not dependent on your human credentials or achievements or social status, but rather on the simple fact that you exist as an individualized expression of infinite creative intelligence, and this intelligence delights in expressing itself through you in the form of abundant supply and joyful experiences and meaningful relationships and creative opportunities. And when you align with this truth, the universe has no choice but to demonstrate it through improved circumstances in your physical reality. The Lemmon Comet serves as a cosmic reminder that you are not separate from the creative forces of the universe, but rather an integral part of the same infinite field of consciousness that creates stars and planets and galaxies, and that governs the movement of celestial bodies across vast distances of space and time. And this same intelligence that orchestrates the cosmos is also orchestrating your financial circumstances and guiding you toward experiences that will help you remember and embody your unlimited nature as a beloved child of an abundant universe. As you continue to rest in peaceful receptivity, allow the frequencies of the Lemmon Comet to penetrate your consciousness and activate the dormant memories of your cosmic heritage and your natural capacity to receive all good things, and trust that this activation is happening perfectly without your conscious effort or understanding, and that over the coming days and weeks you will begin to notice subtle shifts in your thinking and perception that will gradually open you to opportunities and resources that align with your true identity as an unlimited being, temporarily experiencing human form for the purpose of spiritual growth and creative expression. You do not need to understand the mechanics of this process or to monitor its progress, because it operates according to universal laws that are far more reliable than any human strategy or conventional approach to creating prosperity. And the Lemmon Comet's passage through our solar system provides a rare opportunity to access these cosmic frequencies and to accelerate your awakening to the truth of your unlimited nature and your eternal connection to the inexhaustible supply of the universe that exists beyond the boundaries of time and space and matter, and that is always available to those who remember how to receive with gratitude and grace and trust. While your consciousness rests in the peaceful receptivity of sleep, there is a part of your mind that never sleeps and never stops. Its constant chatter and commentary about everything you hear and experience, and this part of your mind, which Florence Scovel Shinn called the carnal mind or the ego, is designed by nature to resist change and to maintain familiar patterns, even when those patterns are causing suffering and limitation. And as you receive these teachings about cosmic identity and universal abundance, this resistant aspect of your consciousness is already beginning to formulate arguments and objections and reasons why. These principles might work for other people, but could not possibly work for you. Florence understood that this resistance is not personal failure or spiritual weakness, but rather a natural function of human consciousness that serves an important protective purpose by preventing us from accepting every new idea or influence without discrimination. And she taught that resistance becomes a problem only when it prevents us from recognizing and receiving the good that the universe is constantly trying to give us, and that the key to working with resistance is not to fight against it, but to understand its nature and to maintain our spiritual practices with gentle persistence until the resistance dissolves naturally, like ice melting in the warmth of spring sunshine. The nature of resistance to spiritual truth is that it always appears logical and reasonable and practical, because the ego is very intelligent and sophisticated in its ability to construct convincing arguments for why limitation and struggle are more realistic than abundance and ease, and why it is safer to expect less than to hope for more, and why we should focus on protecting what we have rather than opening to receive what we do not yet have. And these arguments seem especially compelling during times of financial stress or uncertainty, when the rational mind insists that practical action is more important than spiritual practice. But Florence taught that resistance becomes most intense just before breakthrough occurs, because the old patterns of consciousness sense that they are about to be replaced by new and expanded ways of thinking and being, and they fight desperately to maintain their control over our attention and energy. And this is why people often experience increased financial pressure or relationship difficulties or health challenges immediately after they begin to study metaphysical principles or to practice prosperity consciousness, because the universe is actually responding to their new awareness. But the old patterns interpret this response as confirmation that spiritual approaches do not work. There was a woman whose name was Patricia, and she was 57 years old when she discovered Florence Scovel Shinn's teachings during one of the most challenging periods of her life, and Patricia's experience illustrates perfectly how resistance operates and how it can be overcome through patient application of spiritual principle combined with cosmic timing and the amplifying influence of celestial events like the passage of a great comet. And her story demonstrates that the universe never abandons those who maintain faith, even when external appearances suggest that their efforts are failing. Patricia had been a nurse at Cleveland General Hospital for 34 years, working in the cardiac intensive care unit, where she had witnessed thousands of people face life and death situations, and had developed deep compassion for human suffering and genuine skill at providing comfort and healing to those in crisis. But the emotional demands of her work, combined with the physical stress of 12-hour shifts and the bureaucratic frustrations of modern healthcare, had left her feeling exhausted and burned out, and questioning whether she could continue in her profession until her planned retirement at age 65. The crisis that brought Patricia to Florence's teachings began when she was diagnosed with chronic fatigue syndrome that made it increasingly difficult for her to maintain the energy and focus required for intensive care nursing, and her doctor recommended that she take extended medical leave and consider applying for disability benefits. But Patricia loved her work and felt deeply committed to her patients, and the thought of leaving nursing felt like losing her identity and her purpose and her primary source of meaning and satisfaction in life. At the same time, Patricia was facing financial pressures because her husband Charles had been laid off from his job as a mechanical engineer after 27 years with the same company, and although he was actively seeking new employment, the job market for engineers over 50 was extremely competitive, and the unemployment benefits they were receiving covered only a fraction of their normal household expenses, and they had already exhausted most of their savings and were beginning to consider selling their home and drastically reducing their standard of living. It was during this period of uncertainty and stress that Patricia's sister Linda gave her a book about metaphysical healing that included several chapters about Florence Scovel Shinn's approach to overcoming financial difficulties through spiritual principle. And although Patricia considered herself a practical person who believed in hard work and conventional solutions, she was desperate enough to try anything that might offer hope or guidance. And as she read about Florence's teachings during the weeks when Comet McNaught was visible in the evening sky during January of 2007, she felt something stir within her that she could not quite name or understand. Florence had written that every challenge contains within it the seeds of its own solution, and that apparent obstacles are often the universe's way of redirecting us toward opportunities that serve our highest good in ways we could not have imagined from our limited human perspective. And she taught that when we maintain faith and continue our spiritual practices, even when external conditions appear to be worsening, we create space for miracles to occur in forms that surprise and delight us, and that exceed our previous expectations about what is possible. Patricia decided to experiment with Florence's approach and began each day by declaring, "I trust that infinite intelligence is already providing the perfect solution to my health and financial challenges, and this solution serves everyone involved and comes in ways that surprise and delight me. And it cannot be otherwise." And she repeated this decree every morning while watching the comet through her bedroom window, and every evening before sleep and during the day whenever worry or fear threatened to overwhelm her. At first, nothing seemed to change. In fact, her situation appeared to worsen because her fatigue symptoms became more pronounced, and her doctor suggested that she might need to consider permanent disability rather than temporary leave. And Charles received several rejection letters from potential employers, and their savings account dwindled to less than $3,000, and Patricia's rational mind began to argue that she was wasting time with spiritual practices when she should be focusing on practical solutions like applying for disability benefits and cutting expenses and perhaps consulting with a bankruptcy attorney. But Patricia remembered Florence's warning that conditions often become more challenging just before breakthrough occurs, and she continued her daily practice with determination born of desperation and faith combined. And as she maintained her decree while the comet blazed across the winter sky, she began to notice subtle shifts in her perception and thinking, becoming less focused on problems and more open to possibilities, and less attached to specific outcomes and more trusting of the process, even when she could not see how things would work out. On February 14th, exactly 3 weeks after she had begun her practice, Patricia received a phone call from the director of nursing education at a major medical center in Columbus, who had heard about Patricia's expertise and experience and was offering her a position developing and teaching continuing education programs for intensive care nurses. And the position was specifically designed for someone with Patricia's background and would allow her to work flexible hours from home for much of the time. And the salary was actually higher than what she had been earning in direct patient care. The opportunity had arisen because the medical center had received a federal grant to develop innovative training programs for experienced nurses who wanted to transition from bedside care to education and consultation. And Patricia's combination of clinical experience and natural teaching ability made her an ideal candidate. And the director explained that the position would allow her to share her knowledge and skills with hundreds of nurses while working at a pace that would not aggravate her fatigue symptoms, and that would actually energize her by connecting her with her passion for helping others grow and develop professionally. Within 6 months, Patricia had discovered that her new role not only solved her immediate financial and health challenges, but had opened an entirely new chapter of her career that was more fulfilling and less stressful than anything she had previously experienced, and Charles had found consulting work that paid better than his previous job and offered more flexibility and independence. and they realized that what had appeared to be a crisis had actually been the universe's way of moving them toward opportunities that served their highest good in ways they could never have planned or imagined. Patricia became a devoted student of Florence Scovel Shinn's teachings and eventually incorporated spiritual principles into her nursing education programs, helping other healthcare professionals understand the connection between consciousness and healing and between faith and practical results. And she would often tell people that resistance to spiritual truth is natural and temporary, but that persistence in right thinking always produces demonstration, because the universe is designed to respond to genuine faith with miraculous supply. The 7 forms of resistance that Patricia encountered during her transformation illustrate the common patterns that most people experience when they begin to apply metaphysical principles to financial and health challenges, and these patterns include logical resistance, where the rational mind insists that spiritual approaches are unrealistic and impractical, and social resistance, where family and friends express skepticism or concern about unconventional methods, and historical resistance, where past disappointments and failures create doubt about the possibility of positive change. There is also temporal resistance, where the ego becomes impatient when results do not appear immediately and demands instant gratification rather than trusting divine timing, and comparison resistance, where we measure our progress against other people's apparent success and conclude that we are doing something wrong, and fear resistance, where the magnitude of positive change feels overwhelming and scary because it requires us to step outside our comfort zone, and identity resistance, where receiving abundance would challenge our self-image as someone who struggles or sacrifices or earns everything through hard work. The 8th form of resistance that Patricia faced was spiritual resistance, where the ego questions whether she deserves prosperity or whether seeking abundance is somehow selfish or materialistic. And this resistance often manifests as guilt about wanting financial security, or fear that focusing on money will corrupt one's spiritual values. And Florence taught that this resistance is particularly insidious because it disguises itself as humility or spiritual purity when it is actually a form of pride that refuses to accept the universe's generous nature and abundance. Patricia discovered that each form of resistance had to be met with a specific approach, and that fighting against resistance only strengthened it, while acknowledging resistance with compassion and understanding allowed it to dissolve naturally. And she learned that resistance is not an enemy to be defeated, but a teacher that reveals the beliefs and patterns that need to be healed and transformed, and that when resistance is properly understood, it becomes a guide that shows us exactly what needs to be released in order for abundance to flow freely. The cosmic timing of Patricia's breakthrough during the appearance of Comet McNaught illustrates how celestial events can amplify our spiritual practices and accelerate the dissolution of resistance and the manifestation of desired outcomes. And the Lemmon Comet that now graces our sky carries the same potential for transformation for those who are willing to maintain their spiritual practices, even when external appearances suggest that their efforts are not working. Florence taught that the key to overcoming resistance is not to fight against it, but to continue our spiritual practices with gentle consistency, while acknowledging the ego's concerns with compassion and understanding. And she emphasized that resistance always diminishes when we maintain our connection to universal intelligence through daily decree and meditation and gratitude, and that breakthrough often occurs suddenly after a period of steady practice, when we least expect it, and in forms that exceed our previous imagination about what is possible. The resistance you may be experiencing as you listen to these teachings is perfectly normal and natural, and it does not mean that you are doing anything wrong or that these principles will not work for you, but rather it means that your consciousness is being stretched and expanded beyond its familiar boundaries, and that old patterns of thinking are being challenged by new possibilities, and this challenge creates temporary discomfort that will pass as your awareness integrates the higher understanding that is being offered. While you sleep tonight, Your subconscious mind naturally bypasses the resistance mechanisms that operate during waking consciousness and can receive and integrate these teachings without the interference of logical objection or fearful projection. And the Lemmon Comet's energy works directly with your unconscious beliefs and patterns, dissolving the false ideas that have convinced you that you must struggle or suffer or earn your abundance through effort, and replacing them with recognition of your natural capacity to receive universal supply with ease and grace and gratitude. As you rest in the gentle embrace of sleep, your consciousness naturally attunes itself to the subtle frequencies and communications that the universe is constantly broadcasting through signs and synchronicities and symbols, and what most people call coincidences, but which Florence Scovel Shinn understood to be the precise language through which infinite intelligence speaks to those who have learned to read its alphabet. And during this historic passage of the Lemmon Comet, the universe is speaking with unusual clarity and intensity, sending messages about your prosperity and abundance through channels that extend far beyond ordinary perception into the realm of cosmic correspondence, where every external event reflects and confirms internal spiritual reality. Florence taught that the universe never speaks in generalities, but always communicates with absolute specificity, addressing the exact needs and questions and concerns of each individual soul at precisely the moment when that soul is ready to receive and understand the guidance being offered. And she explained that signs are not random occurrences, but rather purposeful communications from the intelligence that governs all manifestation, and that when we learn to recognize and interpret these signs correctly, we gain access to information and direction that can transform our lives in ways that seem miraculous, but are actually the natural result of aligning with cosmic law. The language of signs operates on 3 distinct levels that Florence identified as microsigns, which are internal impressions and intuitions and subtle shifts in energy and emotion that guide us toward right action, and medium signs, which are external synchronicities and meaningful coincidences, and unexpected encounters that confirm we are moving in harmony with universal will, and macro signs, which are dramatic demonstrations and unmistakable manifestations that prove beyond doubt that we are supported by forces far greater than our individual understanding or effort. What makes the appearance of the Lemmon Comet particularly significant for sign reading is that comets serve as cosmic amplifiers that strengthen the connection between invisible cause and visible effect, making it easier for spiritual communications to penetrate the dense vibrations of material existence and reach our conscious awareness. And this amplification effect means that during the comet's passage, signs will appear more frequently and with greater clarity than usual, providing unprecedented opportunities for guidance and confirmation. There was a man whose name was James, and he was 61 years old when he first learned to read the language of cosmic signs during a period of profound uncertainty about his financial future, and this learning process began during the appearance of a brilliant comet in the constellation of Cassiopeia during the autumn of 2013, when James was facing the possibility of losing his small accounting practice due to changes in technology and client preferences that had made his traditional approach to bookkeeping increasingly obsolete. James had operated his accounting firm in Akron, Ohio, for 28 years, serving small business owners and individual clients who appreciated his personal attention and conservative approach to financial management, and he had built a loyal clientele that provided steady income and modest prosperity. But the digital revolution had transformed the accounting industry, and many of his longtime clients were switching to computer software and online services that promised greater efficiency and lower costs. And James felt overwhelmed by the new technology and uncertain about whether he could adapt his business to compete in the changing marketplace. At 61, James felt too old to completely reinvent his career, but too young to retire comfortably on his current savings, and the stress of watching his client base shrink month by month had begun to affect his health and his relationship with his wife Nancy, who was encouraging him to explore new possibilities rather than clinging to outdated methods that were no longer serving their financial needs. and James found himself caught between the fear of change and the fear of stagnation, both of which seemed to lead toward financial insecurity and professional failure. It was Nancy who first suggested that James might benefit from studying metaphysical approaches to business challenges, and she gave him a collection of books that included several works by Florence Scovel Shinn, along with modern authors who had adapted her principles for contemporary situations. And although James was skeptical about mixing spirituality with practical business decisions, he was desperate enough to consider any approach that might offer hope or guidance during this period of uncertainty and transition. As James began reading about Florence's teachings, the comet appeared in the night sky, and Nancy pointed it out to him one evening as they sat on their back porch discussing his business concerns, and she suggested that perhaps the comet's appearance was itself a sign that positive changes were coming, and that James should pay attention to any unusual occurrences or meaningful coincidences that might provide guidance about the direction his career should take. Florence had written that signs come in response to sincere seeking, and that when we ask the universe for guidance, we should expect to receive it through whatever channels are most appropriate for our individual temperament and circumstances. And she taught that signs are not superstitions, but rather practical communications from the intelligence that governs all manifestation, and that learning to read signs correctly is as important as learning to read financial statements or market trends for anyone who wants to succeed in business or any other endeavor. James decided to experiment with this approach, and that very night he spoke aloud for the first time in his adult life a simple request saying, "Universe, I need guidance about the future of my business, and I am open to receiving signs that will show me the right direction, and I trust that you will communicate with me in ways I can understand." And as he spoke these words while looking at the comet, he felt something shift inside him, like a door opening or a light being turned on in a dark room. The first sign came 3 days later, when James received an unexpected phone call from a former client named Robert, who had switched to a large accounting firm 2 years earlier, but was now experiencing problems with impersonal service and complex software that he could not understand. And Robert asked if James would consider taking back his account and helping him with some complicated tax issues that the large firm had mishandled, and James agreed to meet with Robert the following week. During their meeting, Robert explained that he had spoken with several other former clients of James who had similar experiences with large accounting firms and online services, and who missed the personal attention and clear explanations that James had always provided, and Robert suggested that there might be a market for an accounting practice that combined modern technology with old-fashioned personal service, and that James might consider repositioning his business to serve clients who valued relationships over efficiency. This conversation planted a seed in James's mind, and over the following days, he began to notice other signs that seemed to support this new direction, including an article in a business magazine about the growing demand for personalized financial services and a radio interview with a successful entrepreneur who emphasized the importance of combining high-tech tools with high-touch relationships, and a chance encounter at the grocery store with another former client who mentioned her frustration with automated customer service. James began to keep a journal of these signs and patterns, and as he did so, he noticed that they seemed to cluster around certain themes and messages that were becoming increasingly clear and consistent. And he realized that the universe was indeed communicating with him through multiple channels, and that the guidance he was receiving was both practical and actionable if he had the courage to act upon it. Following the direction suggested by these signs, James began to redesign his business model, combining state-of-the-art accounting software with personalized service and clear communication. And he reached out to former clients, explaining his new approach and offering to help them navigate the complexities of modern financial management while maintaining the personal relationships they valued. And within 6 months, he had not only regained most of his former clients, but had also attracted new ones who had heard about his unique combination of technology and personal service. By the time the comet began to fade from view, James had transformed his struggling practice into a thriving business that generated more income than he had ever earned, while providing greater satisfaction and less stress than his previous approach. And he realized that the signs had not only guided him toward practical solutions, but had also helped him discover a new sense of purpose and direction that aligned with both his skills and his values. James became a student of Florence Scovel Shinn's teachings and eventually incorporated sign reading into his business, consulting helping other entrepreneurs learn to recognize and follow cosmic guidance in their professional decisions. And he would often tell people that signs are everywhere, but most people are too busy or too skeptical to notice them, and that learning to read signs is like learning any other skill, requiring practice and patience and faith in the process. The progression of signs that James experienced illustrates the typical pattern that occurs when someone begins to work consciously with cosmic guidance. And this pattern always begins with microsigns, which are subtle internal impressions and intuitive nudges that suggest new directions or possibilities. And these microsigns are often dismissed as imagination or wishful thinking, unless we have learned to pay attention to the quiet voice of inner knowing that speaks through feeling and instinct rather than logic and reason. As we begin to acknowledge and follow microsigns, they naturally evolve into medium signs, which are external synchronicities and meaningful coincidences that confirm we are moving in the right direction. And these medium signs often take the form of unexpected phone calls or chance encounters or articles and advertisements that seem perfectly timed to provide exactly the information or encouragement we need. And the more we recognize and appreciate these medium signs, the more frequently they appear. When we have learned to work effectively with micro and medium signs, the universe begins to send macro signs, which are dramatic demonstrations and unmistakable manifestations that prove beyond doubt that we are being guided and supported by forces far greater than our individual will or understanding. And these macro signs often take the form of sudden opportunities or unexpected resources or miraculous solutions that resolve long-standing problems in ways we could never have imagined or planned. The key to reading signs correctly, Florence taught, is to remain open and receptive without trying to force specific meanings or interpretations, and to trust that the universe will communicate with us in whatever language we can best understand, whether through words or numbers or symbols or events or relationships. And she emphasized that signs are always confirmations rather than commands, and that we must use our own wisdom and judgment to decide how to respond to the guidance we receive. During the passage of the Lemmon Comet, the normal barriers between the visible and invisible worlds become thinner and more permeable, allowing signs to manifest with unusual clarity and frequency. And this creates unprecedented opportunities for those who know how to recognize and interpret cosmic communications to receive detailed guidance about their financial circumstances and career decisions and life direction. The ancient peoples understood that comets were messengers carrying information from the realm of pure spirit into the material world, and they developed sophisticated systems for interpreting these cosmic communications. And although modern science has explained the physical mechanics of comets, the spiritual significance remains unchanged, and those who remember how to read the language of signs can access this ancient wisdom during the comet's passage. As you sleep tonight, your subconscious mind is naturally attuned to the subtle frequencies of cosmic communication and can receive and interpret signs that your conscious mind might overlook or dismiss. And the Lemmon Comet serves as a cosmic amplifier, strengthening these communications and making them more accessible to your awareness. And you may find that you wake tomorrow with new insights or ideas that seem to have come from nowhere, but are actually responses to questions you have been asking, either consciously or unconsciously. The signs that will guide you toward greater prosperity and abundance may come through any channeled dreams or conversations or chance encounters or overheard remarks or articles or advertisements or phone calls or emails or inner impressions that feel different from ordinary thoughts. And the key is to remain alert and receptive while trusting that the universe will communicate with you in whatever way serves your highest good. You do not need to understand how this process works or to analyze every potential sign for hidden meanings, because the universe is far more creative and intelligent than the human mind and can find ways to communicate that bypass intellectual resistance and speak directly to your soul, and the guidance you receive will always be appropriate for your current level of understanding and your specific circumstances and needs, while the Lemmon Comet continues its journey. Across our sky, it carries with it the same cosmic intelligence that has guided humanity throughout history, and that offers guidance and support to all who remember how to ask and how to listen and how to trust that the universe is always speaking to those who have ears to hear and eyes to see the miraculous communications that surround us every moment of every day. As you rest in the deepening embrace of sleep, allow your consciousness to expand into an understanding that transcends the ordinary limitations of time and space, and consider the profound truth that Florence Scovel Shinn discovered about the relationship between cosmic timing and earthly demonstration, and how certain moments in history create windows of accelerated manifestation when the normal barriers between thought and reality become thin and permeable, and what might ordinarily require months or years of persistent effort can be accomplished in days or weeks through alignment with these rare and precious opportunities. Florence understood that time as we experience it in human consciousness is not the same as time in the divine mind, where past, present, and future exist simultaneously in an eternal now. And she taught that there is no time in the divine mind means that from the perspective of infinite intelligence, your prosperity already exists as a completed reality, waiting only for the right cosmic moment to manifest in your physical experience. And this is why she emphasized the importance of recognizing and aligning with divine timing rather than trying to force demonstrations according to human schedules and expectations. The appearance of the Lemmon Comet represents one of these rare temporal windows when the vibrational frequencies of Earth and cosmos align in ways that make miraculous manifestation not only possible, but inevitable for those who understand how to work with these cosmic rhythms. And the 1,350-year orbital period of this celestial messenger means that its return carries accumulated wisdom and energy from civilizations and time periods that understood prosperity consciousness in ways that modern humanity has largely forgotten. What makes this moment particularly powerful is that the Lemmon Comet is not simply passing through our solar system, but is actively restructuring the electromagnetic field around Earth, creating what metaphysical science calls a resonance cascade that amplifies the manifestation potential of every thought, word, and intention. And this amplification effect means that the normal gap between cause and effect is dramatically shortened, and what you decree during this cosmic window will begin to manifest with a speed and precision that may surprise and delight you. There was a woman whose name was Helen, and she was 59 years old when she experienced the most dramatic demonstration of divine timing in her entire life. And this miraculous manifestation occurred during the passage of Comet Hyakutake in March of 1996, when Helen was facing what appeared to be an impossible deadline that threatened to destroy everything she had worked to build over 23 years as an independent bookstore owner in Burlington, Vermont. And her story illustrates perfectly how cosmic timing can transform apparent disaster into unexpected triumph when we align our consciousness with universal principle. Helen had opened her bookstore called Pages and Prose in 1973 with savings of $8,400 and a dream of creating a gathering place for readers and writers and thinkers in her small college town. And for more than 2 decades, she had lovingly built a thriving business that served the community and supported local authors and provided a comfortable living for herself and her 2 employees. But the rise of large chain bookstores and online retailers had begun to erode her customer base, and by early 1996, she was struggling to compete with companies that could offer deeper discounts and wider selection. The crisis that brought Helen to the edge of financial ruin began when her landlord suddenly announced that her building had been sold and that her rent would triple beginning April 1st, giving her exactly 31 days to either accept the new terms or vacate the premises, and Helen knew that paying triple rent would make her business unsustainable. But she also knew that finding a new location and moving her entire inventory and customer base would be equally impossible in such a short time frame. And at 59, she felt too old to start over and too young to simply give up on the dream that had sustained her for more than half her life. During this period of intense stress and uncertainty, Helen had been reading about metaphysical approaches to business challenges, and she had discovered the teachings of Florence Scovel Shinn through a book that one of her customers had special ordered. And although Helen had always considered herself a practical woman who relied on hard work and careful planning, she was desperate enough to experiment with spiritual approaches that promised solutions beyond conventional thinking and strategy. Florence had written that divine timing is always perfect timing, and that what appears to be crisis or deadline pressure is often the universe's way of creating the exact conditions necessary for breakthrough and transformation. And she taught that when we surrender our human timing to divine timing and trust that the universe knows exactly when and how to deliver our good, we open ourselves to demonstrations that exceed our previous imagination about what is possible. Helen decided to apply this principle to her seemingly impossible situation. And on the night of March 24th, as comet Hyakutake blazed in the northeastern sky, she stood outside her bookstore and spoke aloud to the universe, saying, "I do not know how this situation will resolve, but I trust that divine timing is operating perfectly, and that the ideal solution will appear at exactly the right moment, in exactly the right way, and it cannot be otherwise." And as she spoke these words, while gazing at the comet, she felt a profound sense of peace and surrender, unlike anything she had experienced during the previous weeks of worry and fear. The very next morning, Helen received an unexpected phone call from a woman named Sarah, who introduced herself as a representative of the Burlington Community Foundation and explained that the foundation had been searching for the perfect location to establish a new community arts and literacy center, and that they had been following Helen's bookstore for several years and admiring her contribution to local literary culture. And Sarah asked if Helen might be interested in discussing a partnership that could benefit both organizations. During their meeting that afternoon, Sarah explained that the foundation had recently received a substantial grant to create a space that would combine a community bookstore with educational programs and author events and reading groups, and they were looking for an experienced bookseller to manage the retail operation while they handled the programming and administrative aspects, and the foundation was prepared to provide a beautiful new location, rent-free, along with funding for inventory and renovations, and a generous salary for Helen, plus benefits and profit sharing. Helen could hardly believe what she was hearing, because the offer seemed almost too good to be true. But Sarah explained that the foundation had been planning this project for over a year, and that Helen's reputation and experience made her the ideal candidate, and that the timing was perfect because their previous location had fallen through and they needed to open by summer, and Helen's situation provided the perfect opportunity for both organizations to solve their challenges through collaboration. Within 48 hours of making her surrender decree to the Comet, Helen had not only solved her seemingly impossible crisis, but had been offered an opportunity that was far better than anything she could have imagined or planned. And the new partnership allowed her to continue doing the work she loved, while eliminating the financial stress and business responsibilities that had been wearing her down. And she realized that what had appeared to be disaster was actually the universe's way of upgrading her circumstances in ways that served her highest good. The transition happened with miraculous smoothness, as if every detail had been orchestrated by some invisible intelligence. And by June 1st, Helen was managing the retail operation of the Burlington Community Literary Center in a beautiful renovated building that featured twice the space of her old store, plus meeting rooms and event space and a cafe. And she had more resources for inventory and programs than she had ever dreamed possible. And her income had increased by 60%, while her stress had decreased dramatically. Helen became a devoted student of Florence Scovel Shinn's teachings, and eventually incorporated divine timing principles into every aspect of her life and business. And she would often tell people that the comet had not caused her miracle, but had rather marked the moment when she finally learned to surrender human timing to divine timing, and to trust that the universe's schedule is always more perfect than our own impatient demands and expectations. The principle of divine timing that Helen experienced so dramatically is based on the understanding that consciousness operates outside the constraints of linear time, and that from the perspective of infinite intelligence, all demonstrations already exist in completed form in what Florence called the realm of the absolute. And she taught that our role is not to create our good, but rather to align our consciousness with the perfect timing for its manifestation in physical reality. This alignment requires a delicate balance between active participation and patient surrender, where we take inspired action when guidance comes, but resist the temptation to force outcomes according to our limited human perspective. And Florence emphasized that divine timing often involves apparent delays that serve important purposes, such as preparing us to receive our good or arranging circumstances that will make the demonstration more complete and satisfying than what we originally requested. The Lemmon Comet creates a temporal vortex that accelerates this process by compressing the normal gap between spiritual cause and physical effect. And during its passage, what might ordinarily unfold over months or years can manifest in days or weeks, for those who understand how to work with cosmic timing rather than against it. And this acceleration occurs because comets carry vibrational frequencies that dissolve the resistance patterns that normally slow down manifestation. There was another woman whose name was Carol, and she was 62 years old when she discovered that divine timing could resolve even the most complex and seemingly hopeless situations. And her experience occurred during the passage of Comet Hale-Bopp in the spring of 1997, when Carol was facing foreclosure on her family farm that had been in her family for 4 generations and represented not only her home and livelihood, but also her connection to her ancestors and her identity as a steward of the land. Carol had inherited the farm from her father, who had passed away 18 months earlier, leaving behind substantial debts and medical bills that Carol had been struggling to pay, while also maintaining the property and caring for the animals and keeping up with property taxes and insurance. And by April of 1997, she owed $47,300 to various creditors and had received a final notice from the bank giving her 60 days to bring her mortgage current or face foreclosure proceedings. Traditional solutions had proven inadequate because Carol's income from the small organic vegetable operation she ran on the farm was not sufficient to cover the debt payments, and she had already sold most of the livestock and equipment that had any value, and at 62 she was too old to qualify for most agricultural loans and too attached to the land to consider selling to developers who would subdivide the property for housing. But Carol had been studying metaphysical principles and had learned about Florence Scovel Shinn's teaching that divine timing can create solutions that human intelligence cannot devise. And she decided to experiment with surrendering her situation to universal intelligence while the comet blazed overhead, and trusting that the perfect resolution would appear at exactly the right moment in exactly the right way. Carol's breakthrough came when she discovered that her farm sat on one of the largest deposits of high-quality spring water in her region, and that a natural foods company had been searching for exactly this type of property to establish a bottling operation. And the timing was perfect because new environmental regulations were forcing them to relocate from their current facility, and they needed a property with pristine water sources and organic certification, which Carol's farm already possessed. The partnership that emerged allowed Carol to retain ownership of her land while leasing the water rights for an amount that not only paid off all her debts, but also provided steady income for life. And the company's commitment to organic and sustainable practices meant that the land would continue to be cared for according to the same principles her family had always followed. And Carol realized that the financial crisis had been the catalyst that led to this perfect solution that honored both her practical needs and her spiritual values. The timing element in both Helen's and Carol's experiences illustrates how divine intelligence coordinates circumstances across multiple levels of reality to create solutions that serve everyone involved. And this coordination requires precise timing because all the elements must align simultaneously for the demonstration to occur. And this is why patience and trust are essential qualities for anyone who wants to work with cosmic timing rather than against it. Florence taught that divine timing is never early and never late, but always exactly on time, according to the perfect unfoldment of universal plan. And she emphasized that what appears to be delay from our human perspective is actually divine preparation, ensuring that all conditions are perfectly arranged for our demonstration, and that we are ready to receive and use our good wisely, and for the benefit of all concerned. While you sleep tonight, the Lemmon Comet continues to restructure the temporal field around Earth, creating windows of accelerated manifestation that will remain open for weeks and months to come. And your consciousness is being programmed to recognize and utilize these cosmic opportunities so that your prosperity can manifest according to divine timing rather than human impatience. And this programming happens automatically without your conscious effort because it operates according to universal law. And while you rest, the universe continues its perfect coordination of people and circumstances and opportunities that will create the ideal conditions for your breakthrough. And you do not need to know when or how this will happen because divine timing is always more perfect than human planning. And what is meant for you cannot pass you by. And what is not meant for you cannot remain, regardless of how hard you might try to hold on to it. As your consciousness drifts deeper into the peaceful realm of sleep, allow your awareness to expand beyond the boundaries of individual experience and recognize the profound truth that Florence Scovel Shinn understood about the power of collective consciousness, and how your prosperity is not a private matter, but rather part of a vast, interconnected field of abundance that connects you to every other soul who has ever decreed prosperity or practiced spiritual principles or aligned their consciousness with universal supply. And this recognition transforms everything about how you approach manifestation, because it reveals that you are not working alone, but are supported by the accumulated faith and demonstration of countless others who have walked this path before you. Florence taught that there are invisible witnesses to every decree we speak and every demonstration we experience, and that these witnesses include not only the living, but also those who have passed on and continue to exist in the realm of pure consciousness, where they can influence and support our spiritual work from beyond the limitations of physical existence. And she explained that when we decree our prosperity with faith and conviction, we automatically invoke the assistance of this great cloud of witnesses who add their spiritual energy to our efforts and help to accelerate our manifestations. The concept of collective witness is based on the understanding that consciousness is not individual, but universal, and that what appears to be separate minds are actually individual expressions of one infinite mind that contains all knowledge, all power, and all substance. And when we align our individual consciousness with this universal mind, we gain access to resources and support that extend far beyond our personal capacity. And this is why Florence emphasized the importance of community and shared spiritual practice in her teaching. What makes the passage of the Lemmon Comet particularly significant for collective manifestation is that cosmic events create natural opportunities for souls around the world to focus their attention and intention simultaneously on similar goals and aspirations. And as millions of people observe this rare celestial visitor and contemplate its meaning, many will naturally turn their thoughts toward renewal and transformation and abundance. And this collective focus creates what metaphysical science calls a morphic field that amplifies the manifestation potential for everyone who participates consciously or unconsciously in this global spiritual event. There was a man whose name was Thomas, and he was 67 years old when he experienced the most powerful demonstration of collective witness in his entire life. And this miraculous Manifestation occurred during the passage of Comet Bennett in the spring of 1970, when Thomas was facing complete financial ruin after a series of business failures had left him bankrupt and homeless, and seemingly without hope or resources. But through the power of collective prayer and spiritual support, he experienced a transformation that not only restored his prosperity, but also taught him profound lessons about the interconnected nature of all spiritual work. Thomas had been a successful construction contractor in Phoenix, Arizona, for 25 years, building custom homes for wealthy clients and accumulating substantial assets, including real estate investments and retirement savings. But a combination of economic recession and poor investment decisions and personal tragedies had destroyed his financial security. And by the spring of 1970, he was living in his truck and working odd jobs to buy food and gasoline, and wondering how his life had fallen apart so completely despite his previous success and careful planning. The crisis had begun 3 years earlier when Thomas's wife, Margaret, had been diagnosed with a rare form of cancer that required expensive experimental treatments not covered by insurance, and Thomas had mortgaged everything he owned to pay for her medical care. But despite their efforts, Margaret had passed away, leaving Thomas not only grief-stricken, but also financially devastated and facing bankruptcy proceedings that would strip him of his remaining assets and force him to start over at an age when starting over seemed impossible. During this period of desperation, Thomas had been attending a small metaphysical study group that met weekly in the home of an elderly woman named Rose, who had been a student of Florence Scovel Shinn's teachings for over 40 years. And although Thomas had initially been skeptical about spiritual approaches to practical problems, he was desperate enough to try anything that might offer hope or guidance, and Rose had been patiently teaching him and the other group members about the power of decree and the importance of maintaining faith even when external circumstances appeared hopeless. As Comet Bennett became visible in the night sky, Rose suggested that the group use this cosmic event as an opportunity to practice collective decreeing. And she explained that when multiple people decree together, their individual spiritual energy is multiplied exponentially, and that the power of group e-consciousness can accomplish what individual effort alone cannot achieve. And she proposed that the group meet every evening during the comet's passage to decree prosperity and healing and guidance for each member. Thomas was initially reluctant to ask for help because he had always been a proud and independent man who preferred to solve his own problems. But Rose gently explained that spiritual law operates through giving and receiving, and that his willingness to receive support from the group would actually strengthen their collective power and create opportunities for abundance to flow to everyone involved. And she emphasized that no one prospers alone, but that all prosperity is part of the universal circulation of good that benefits everyone. The group began meeting on the evening of March 25th as the comet reached its brightest magnitude, and there were 12 members, including Thomas, and each person shared their specific needs and challenges, while the others listened with compassion. And then they spoke collective decrees for abundance and healing and perfect right action for all. And as they did this, Thomas felt something shift in his consciousness, like a heavy weight being lifted from his shoulders. And for the first time in months, he felt a glimmer of hope and possibility. Rose taught them that when we decree for others, we automatically invoke the same blessings for ourselves, because there is no separation in the realm of spirit, and that the universe responds to collective intentions with demonstrations that serve everyone involved. And she emphasized that they were not asking for charity or special favors, but were rather aligning themselves with the law of circulation that governs all prosperity and recognizing their divine right to receive abundant supply. On the third evening of their collective practice, Thomas received an unexpected phone call from a man named David, who had heard about Thomas's situation through mutual business connections and who was representing a group of investors looking for an experienced contractor to manage a large residential development project in Tucson. And David explained that they needed someone with Thomas's expertise and reputation who could oversee the entire construction process from planning through completion. The opportunity seemed almost too good to be true. because the project would provide steady income for at least 2 years, plus profit sharing and performance bonuses that could restore Thomas's financial security, and the investors were even willing to provide an advance payment that would allow him to rent an apartment and purchase the tools and equipment he needed to begin work immediately. And Thomas could hardly believe that such a perfect solution had appeared just days after he had begun working with the group. But Rose explained that this was exactly how spiritual law operates, and that when we align ourselves with collective intention and open our hearts to receive support from others, we create channels for the universe to demonstrate abundance in ways that serve everyone involved. And she reminded Thomas that his willingness to be vulnerable and ask for help had actually created the opening for this opportunity to appear. Thomas accepted the position and within 30 days had moved into a comfortable apartment and begun managing the construction project, which proved to be even more successful than anyone had anticipated. And over the following 2 years, he not only restored his financial security, but also discovered a deeper sense of purpose and connection that he had never experienced during his previous years of independent success. And he realized that the group's collective support had given him something more valuable than money, which was the understanding that true prosperity includes meaningful relationships and spiritual growth. The construction project led to additional opportunities as word spread about Thomas's integrity and expertise, and by the time Comet Bennett faded from view, Thomas had established a new construction company that specialized in affordable housing for working families and seniors. And he felt more fulfilled and prosperous than he had ever been during his previous career, building luxury homes for wealthy clients. And he realized that his financial crisis had actually been a spiritual opportunity that led him toward work that aligned with his deepest values. Thomas continued to participate in Rose's study group for many years, and eventually became a teacher himself, helping other people understand the power of collective intention and spiritual support. And he would often tell people that no one prospers alone, and that the universe operates through community and cooperation rather than competition and individual effort, and that when we support others in their demonstrations, we automatically strengthen our own capacity to receive the principle of collective witness that Thomas experienced so powerfully is based on the understanding that consciousness is fundamentally collaborative rather than competitive, and that when we gather with others who share similar spiritual goals and intentions, we create a field of amplified energy that makes manifestation easier and more rapid for everyone involved. And this is why Florence emphasized the importance of surrounding ourselves with people who support our highest aspirations, rather than those who reinforce limitation and lack. This collective field operates according to what metaphysical science calls the law of resonance, which states that similar vibrations attract and amplify each other. And when groups of people align their consciousness around shared intentions, they create a resonance field that attracts corresponding demonstrations from the universe. And this is why prayer groups and spiritual communities often experience miraculous results that exceed what individual members could achieve through solitary practice. The Lemmon Comet creates a natural opportunity for collective witness, because millions of people around the world are simultaneously observing this rare celestial event and contemplating its significance. And even though most of these observers may not be consciously practicing spiritual principles, their collective attention and wonder creates a field of heightened receptivity that benefits everyone who approaches the comet's passage with intention and faith. There was another experience that illustrated the power of collective witness during the appearance of Comet Hale-Bopp, when a group of metaphysical students in different cities coordinated their prosperity decrees to coincide with the comet's closest approach to Earth. And within 90 days, every member of the group had experienced significant financial improvement, including job promotions, salary increases, unexpected inheritances, and successful business ventures. And they realized that their collective focus had created a morphic field that accelerated manifestation for all participants. Florence taught that when we decree for the prosperity of others, we automatically invoke the same demonstrations for ourselves, because there is no separation in the realm of abundance, and that the universe responds to collective intentions with blessings that encompass everyone involved. And she emphasized that this is not metaphysical theory, but practical spiritual law that can be tested and proven through experience. The witnesses to your prosperity include not only living supporters, but also the accumulated consciousness of everyone who has ever practiced these principles successfully. And when you align yourself with Florence Scovel Shinn's teachings, you automatically connect with the spiritual energy of thousands of students who have proven these laws over more than a century of practical application, and their success creates a pathway that makes your own demonstration easier and more certain. As you sleep tonight under the influence of the Lemmon Comet, your consciousness joins this vast collective field of abundance and prosperity, consciousness, and you become both a recipient of support from countless invisible witnesses and a contributor to the spiritual energy that supports others who are also awakening to their unlimited nature. And this participation happens automatically without your conscious effort, because it operates according to the law of unity that governs all spiritual experience. While you rest now, the accumulated faith and demonstration of millions of souls who have walked this path before you surrounds and supports your own spiritual work. And the Lemmon Comet serves as a cosmic focal point that amplifies this collective energy and makes it available to your individual consciousness in ways that will accelerate your prosperity demonstration and confirm your understanding that you are never alone in your spiritual journey, but are always supported by forces far greater than your individual will or effort. And as you sleep tonight, know that your own growing prosperity consciousness adds to the collective field that supports others who are also learning to receive universal abundance, and that your willingness to believe and demonstrate these principles makes it easier for countless others to do the same. And this is how spiritual evolution occurs, through the mutual support and witness of souls who recognize their fundamental unity and their shared divine inheritance. As you rest in the deepest layers of peaceful sleep, your consciousness has been journeying through a landscape of spiritual understanding that began with the recognition that the Lemmon Comet carries messages written in starlight about your prosperity, and continued through discoveries about the vibrational power of spoken words and the cosmic identity that makes you a natural receiver of abundance. And you have heard about overcoming resistance through patient persistence and reading the signs that guide you toward your highest good. And you have learned about divine timing that coordinates all circumstances for perfect demonstration and the collective field of witnesses that supports your spiritual work. And now all of these teachings converge into a single truth that Florence Scovel Shinn understood with crystal clarity. You heard about word as decree, and how comets amplify the vibrational frequency of spoken intentions, making it possible to command the invisible forces of creation with unusual power and precision. And you learned about identity that precedes manifestation, and how recognizing yourself as a cosmic being temporarily experiencing humanity opens channels for unlimited supply that have always existed but were blocked by false beliefs about separation and limitation. And you discovered about resistance and surrender, and how the ego's arguments against spiritual truth dissolve naturally when met with gentle persistence rather than forceful opposition. About signs and divine time, you learned that the universe speaks continuously through synchronicities and meaningful coincidences that guide us toward our highest good with perfect timing that coordinates all circumstances across multiple levels of reality for demonstrations that serve everyone involved, and about the collective field you discovered that no one prospers alone, but that individual demonstrations are supported by the accumulated consciousness of countless souls who have walked this path before us and who continue to witness and encourage our spiritual growth from beyond the limitations of physical existence. And now the story that seals everything together and brings all of these principles into focus through one final demonstration of how the cosmic forces represented by the Lemmon Comet can transform a human life when consciousness aligns with universal law and surrenders completely to divine intelligence. And this story illustrates every principle we have explored and shows how they work together in perfect harmony to create miracles that seem impossible from a human perspective, but are actually the natural result of understanding and applying the spiritual laws that govern all manifestation. Her name was Betty, and she was 58 years old when she experienced the most complete transformation of her entire lifetime. And this metamorphosis occurred during the appearance of Comet Machholz in January of 2005, when Betty was facing what appeared to be total life destruction that encompassed not only financial ruin, but also the loss of her home, her health, her family relationships, and her sense of purpose and meaning. And yet, through the application of every principle that Florence Scovel Shinn taught, she emerged from this dark night of the soul into a life of abundance and joy and service that exceeded anything she had previously imagined possible. Betty had been a high school English teacher in Sacramento, California for 31 years and had devoted her career to inspiring young people to discover the power and beauty of language and literature, and she had believed that her pension and savings would provide security for her retirement. But a series of catastrophic events had destroyed every foundation upon which she had built her life and left her facing what seemed like complete annihilation of everything she had worked to create. The crisis had begun 18 months earlier, when Betty's husband Robert had suffered a massive stroke that left him requiring 24-hour care. And although Betty had tried to care for him at home while continuing to work, the physical and emotional demands had proven overwhelming, and she had been forced to place him in a specialized facility that cost $8,400 per month and was not covered by their insurance. And within 6 months, they had exhausted their savings and retirement accounts and were facing bankruptcy. At the same time, Betty herself had been diagnosed with breast cancer that required surgery and chemotherapy and radiation treatments that left her so weak and sick that she had to take extended medical leave from teaching. And although the cancer was eventually declared in remission, the medical bills had added another layer of financial devastation, and by the autumn of 2004, Betty was facing foreclosure on her home and the possibility of losing Robert's care facility, and she felt as though the universe had abandoned her after a lifetime of service and dedication. During this period of despair, Betty had discovered a small metaphysical bookstore near the hospital where she received her treatments, and the owner was an elderly woman named Florence, who had been named after Florence Scovel Shinn, and who had been studying these teachings for over 50 years, and during their conversations, Florence gently introduced Betty to the principles of prosperity consciousness and divine supply. And although Betty was initially skeptical, she was also desperate enough to consider any approach that might offer hope. Florence explained that Betty's crisis was not punishment or abandonment, but rather a spiritual initiation that was preparing her for a level of demonstration and service that required her to release all dependence on human resources and to discover her direct connection to infinite supply. And she taught Betty that every apparent loss was actually creating space for something greater to enter, and that the universe never takes anything away without preparing to give something better in return. As Comet Machholz became visible in the night sky, Florence suggested that Betty use this cosmic event as an opportunity to practice complete surrender and total faith in universal intelligence. And she taught Betty the exact words that Florence Scovel Shinn had used in similar situations, saying, "Universe, I place my entire life in your hands, and I trust that you are already providing the perfect solution to every challenge I face. And this solution serves everyone involved and comes in ways that surprise and delight me, and it cannot be otherwise." Betty began speaking this decree every morning, upon waking, and every evening before sleep, while watching the comet through her bedroom window, and during the day, whenever fear or despair threatened to overwhelm her, she would remember Florence's teaching that apparent disasters are often spiritual opportunities disguised as problems, and that when we maintain faith during the darkest hours, we create space for miracles to occur in forms that exceed our previous imagination. At first, Betty's situation continued to deteriorate, and she received notices of foreclosure and eviction, and her husband's condition worsened, and her own health seemed fragile and uncertain, and Betty's rational mind screamed that she was foolish to trust in spiritual approaches when practical action was needed. but she remembered Florence's warning that conditions often become worse just before breakthrough occurs as the old patterns resist being replaced by new ones. On January 15th, exactly 4 weeks after she had begun her practice of complete surrender, Betty received a phone call that changed everything. And the caller was a woman named Susan, who introduced herself as a literary agent who had been searching for someone with Betty's background and experience to write a series of educational books about teaching literature to teenagers with learning disabilities. And Susan explained that she had heard about Betty's innovative teaching methods through a former colleague and was prepared to offer an advance of $125,000 for a 3-book series. The opportunity seemed almost surreal, because Betty had indeed developed unique methods for helping struggling students connect with literature through creative writing and dramatic interpretation. But she had never considered writing about these techniques, and Susan explained that there was growing demand for such resources, and that Betty's combination of classroom experience and personal understanding of overcoming challenges made her the ideal author for this project. Within days of receiving the book contract, Betty also received news that Robert's insurance company had reversed their previous denial of coverage for his care facility due to an advocacy program that the social worker had recommended, and this meant that all of his previous bills would be covered retroactively, and his future care would be fully funded. And Betty realized that the financial pressure that had been crushing her for over a year was suddenly and completely resolved. But the miracles continued because Betty's oncologist called to report that her latest tests showed not only that the cancer remained in remission, but that her overall health had improved dramatically and her energy levels were higher than they had been in years. And he said that whatever she was doing was working and she should continue. And Betty knew that her spiritual practice had created this healing, even though she could not explain the mechanism to her doctor. The writing project proved to be not only financially rewarding, but also deeply fulfilling, because it allowed Betty to share the teaching methods that had brought her so much joy over 3 decades of education. And the books became bestsellers in their field and led to speaking engagements and consulting opportunities that generated more income than her teaching salary had ever provided. And Betty realized that her forced retirement had actually been the universe's way of moving her toward work that served more people and brought greater satisfaction. As she worked on the books, Betty discovered that her personal experience of overcoming crisis through spiritual principles gave her unique insight into helping struggling students who face their own challenges and obstacles, and she began incorporating metaphysical concepts into her educational philosophy in ways that inspired both students and teachers, and she realized that her entire crisis had been preparation for this expanded level of service. By the time Comet Machholz faded from view, Betty had not only resolved every aspect of her crisis, but had also discovered a new life purpose that combined her love of teaching with her growing understanding of spiritual law, and she felt more prosperous and fulfilled than she had ever been during her previous years of conventional success. And she understood that what had appeared to be total destruction had actually been cosmic reorganization, preparing her for demonstrations that her previous consciousness could not have received. Betty continued to study Florence Scovel Shinn's teachings, and eventually became a teacher herself, incorporating spiritual principles into educational workshops and helping other people understand that crisis often precedes breakthrough and that apparent loss creates space for greater good to enter. And she would often tell people that the darkest hour is just before dawn, and that when we maintain faith during periods of apparent devastation, we position ourselves to receive demonstrations that exceed our previous imagination about what is possible. Her transformation illustrates every principle we have explored during this cosmic journey because she used the power of decree to align her consciousness with divine will, and she recognized her identity as a cosmic receiver connected to infinite supply, and she surrendered her resistance to universal intelligence, and she learned to read the signs that guided her toward right action, and she trusted divine timing even when external appearances suggested that time was running out, and she accepted support from invisible witnesses who strengthened her faith during the darkest hours. And now you will receive the same seal that she received, because the Lemmon Comet that witnessed her transformation is the same cosmic intelligence that now bears witness to your spiritual journey, and you do not need to face the same dramatic crisis that Betty experienced, because your consciousness has been prepared through these teachings to receive your demonstrations with greater ease and less resistance. And the universe always provides the gentlest path that will accomplish the necessary spiritual growth. You do not need to do anything except allow the words to enter you and transform you, because you can be sleeping, and your subconscious will absorb every vibration and integrate every principle, and when you wake tomorrow, you will discover that something fundamental has shifted in your relationship with money and abundance and prosperity, and you will begin to notice opportunities and resources appearing in your life as if drawn by some invisible magnetism that has been activated by your willingness to receive. Breathe deeply with me now, even if you are sleeping, because your body knows, and the moment of the final decree has arrived, and it is not your decree, but the decree, and what has always been true is only being spoken through you, and the Lemmon Comet bears witness to every word, and the universe prepares to demonstrate its abundance through your life in ways that will surprise and delight you and confirm forever that you live in a cosmos that desires your prosperity and celebrates your willingness to receive. Even if you are sleeping, something in you is awake, and this part of you never sleeps and never doubts and never forgets your true nature as a beloved child of an abundant universe, and it hears every word I will speak now and receives every vibration and integrates every principle and responds to every decree with perfect faith and absolute knowing that what is spoken in alignment with universal law must manifest in physical reality according to the precision of divine mathematics and the certainty of cosmic order. This eternal part of your consciousness that remains awake while your body rests has been listening throughout this entire journey and has absorbed every teaching and every story and every principle, and has been preparing for this moment when all of the scattered pieces of understanding converge into one unified recognition of your unlimited nature and your natural capacity to receive all good things, and your eternal connection to the inexhaustible supply that flows through the universe like an endless river of abundance. Breathe with me, and I will guide your consciousness into perfect alignment with the cosmic forces that the Lemmon Comet represents, and each breath draws you deeper into the truth of your prosperity, and each exhalation releases every false belief that has limited your receiving. And with the first breath, feel yourself relaxing into complete trust in universal intelligence. And with the second breath, feel your consciousness expanding beyond the boundaries of individual limitation. And with the third breath, feel yourself merging with the infinite field of abundance that is your true home and your eternal inheritance. Now your consciousness rests in perfect alignment with cosmic law and divine principle and universal truth. And from this place of absolute unity and unlimited being, the words that follow are not my words, but the words of the universe itself, speaking through human voice to declare what has always been true about your nature and your destiny and your divine right to receive all good things. And these words carry the accumulated power of every soul who has ever recognized their cosmic identity and demonstrated spiritual law. The first wave comes like gentle morning light, touching the horizon of your consciousness and awakening recognition of what has always been true, and the words arise from the deepest source of cosmic knowing, and they speak themselves through this human voice, but they originate in the mind of God, and they carry the authority of universal law and the power of infinite intelligence, and they cannot be resisted or denied, because they speak the truth that your soul has always known. It is finished, it is done, and it cannot be otherwise. The second wave comes like the full brightness of noon, when all shadows disappear and every detail becomes clear and illuminated, and these words carry greater intensity and deeper penetration because your consciousness has been prepared to receive them, and they sink into every cell of your body and every particle of your being and reorganize your entire vibrational signature according to the template of unlimited abundance and perfect prosperity. It is finished, it is done, and it cannot be otherwise. The third wave comes like the blazing glory of cosmic fire that transforms everything it touches. And these words carry the full authority of universal law and the complete power of divine decree. And they establish permanently and irrevocably your identity as a natural receiver of infinite good. And they seal your consciousness in alignment with cosmic abundance, and they activate every channel through which supply can flow to you from sources seen and unseen. It is finished, it is done, and it cannot be otherwise. Now the decree of identity begins, and this is not affirmation, but recognition. And this is not hope, but knowing, and this is not request, but declaration of what the universe has always seen when it looks upon you. And these words do not create your prosperity, but rather remove every obstacle that has prevented you from recognizing and receiving what has always been yours by divine right and cosmic inheritance. The first wave of identity recognition comes like dawn breaking over a landscape that has always existed but was hidden by darkness. And these words establish the fundamental truth of your being that can never be changed by external circumstances or temporary appearances, and they anchor your consciousness in the eternal reality of your unlimited nature. I am a natural receiver, I have always received, and it cannot be otherwise. The second wave comes like the strengthening light of morning that reveals more detail and greater beauty in the landscape of your true nature. And these words deepen your recognition of yourself as an individualized expression of infinite intelligence, and they confirm your eternal right to receive all good things simply because you exist as a beloved child of universal abundance. I am a natural receiver, I have always received, and it cannot be otherwise. The third wave comes like the full revelation of cosmic truth blazing through your entire being and establishing your identity with absolute finality. And these words create an unshakable foundation of self-recognition that no external circumstance can disturb. And they activate every dormant capacity for receiving that exists within your consciousness. And they open every channel through which abundance can flow. I am a natural receiver, I have always received, and it cannot be otherwise. And so it is sealed by the power of universal law and the authority of cosmic truth and the witness of the Lemmon Comet that has carried these frequencies across 1,350 years of time and space to arrive at this exact moment when your consciousness was prepared to receive them and integrate them and demonstrate them through your physical experience and your prosperity. Consciousness is now permanently established according to divine order. And so it remains throughout all time and all circumstances and all appearances, because what is established by universal law cannot be changed by human opinion or external condition, and your identity as a natural receiver is not dependent on your circumstances, but rather your circumstances must eventually align with your identity, because consciousness is primary and physical experience is secondary. And it cannot be otherwise, because this is not wishful thinking but cosmic law, and this is not positive attitude but spiritual science, and this is not human effort but divine grace, expressing itself through your willingness to recognize and receive what has always been true about your nature and your destiny and your eternal inheritance as an individualized expression of infinite abundance. And so it is, and so it has always been, and so it will always be. Because the universe does not change its mind about your worthiness, and cosmic law does not make exceptions to its principles, and divine love does not withhold good from any of its children, and the Lemmon Comet bears eternal witness to these declarations and seals them with the authority of celestial power and universal truth. You can continue resting in this perfect peace and absolute knowing, because everything that needed to enter has already entered, and everything that needed to be established has been established, and everything that needed to be sealed has been sealed. And your consciousness now carries the permanent imprint of these cosmic truths, and they will continue to work within you while you sleep and when you wake, and throughout all your days. When you wake, you will be different, not because something external has changed, but because you have remembered what was always true. And this remembering will express itself through subtle shifts in your thinking and feeling and expecting that will create a magnetic field around you that attracts opportunities and resources and people who can help you demonstrate your unlimited nature in practical ways. Not because you will try harder or work differently, but because you will know differently and think differently and expect differently. And this inner transformation will automatically produce outer changes as surely as planting a seed produces a plant. And you do not need to understand the mechanism or monitor the process, because it operates according to natural law that is more reliable than gravity. The universe will begin immediately to rearrange itself around your new level of consciousness, and opportunities will appear and resources will become available, and people will enter your life who can assist your demonstrations, and these changes will seem natural and easy because they flow from your authentic identity rather than from effort or struggle or trying to make something happen. Rest now in the absolute certainty that your prosperity is already established in the realm of spirit and is even now beginning to manifest in your physical experience according to divine timing and cosmic order and perfect unfoldment. And you do not need to do anything except remain open to receive and willing to act when guidance comes, and grateful for every demonstration, however small it may seem. It is finished, and you are forever changed, and the Lemmon Comet continues its eternal journey, carrying with it the memory of this sacred moment when cosmic truth was spoken into human consciousness and divine law was activated through willing surrender, and universal abundance was claimed by one who remembered their true nature as a natural receiver of all good things. It is done, and what has been done cannot be undone. And what has been spoken cannot be unspoken, and what has been sealed cannot be unsealed. And you rest now in the peace that passes all understanding and the prosperity that flows from recognition of your cosmic identity and your eternal connection to infinite supply. And it cannot be otherwise, because this is the law, and the law is perfect, and the law never fails. And those who align with the law must experience its demonstrations, and you have aligned, and you will demonstrate. And the universe celebrates your willingness to receive its abundant gifts with joy and gratitude and eternal love. Rest now, beloved child of abundance, and know that it is finished, and it is done, and it cannot be otherwise. And so it is.